Chapter 1806. Nyetian looked at the black petal in his hand, and his eyes trembled violently. At this time, Tian, who was sitting on Jinin, came over. Seeing Nyetian's strange expression, he asked, "Nyetian, are you okay?" Nyetian shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Then, he took out the 9 extremes, and Tian and Jin and returned to the 9 extremes. Tian and Jinin, this pair seemed to be not bad. "Young master," Jing Chun came to Nyetian's side. Seeing the black petal in Nyetian's hand, he couldn't help but frown, and his face changed. Jian Jingyun and the others also came, and when they saw the black petal, their faces froze. "These are 2 identical black petals." Nyetian's face sank. He took out another black petal and said with a frown, "Young master, you mean that the black-clothed martial artist just now is from the Black Lotus?" Jing Chun reacted, and his face changed as he said in astonishment, "If the black petal is the symbol of the Black Lotus, then the black-clothed martial artist just now must be from the Black Lotus." Nyetian nodded, and his eyes flickered. Apparently, he was thinking about something. If the black-clothed martial artist was from the Black Lotus, then the black-clothed martial artist just now must be from the Black Lotus. This black-clothed martial artist seemed to be waiting for Nyetian and the others, and then suddenly attacked, wanted to kill Nyetian and the others. Unfortunately, the black-clothed martial artist didn't expect that there was a freak like Tian by Nyetian's side. "Nyetian, that guy just now was obviously coming for us. If he is from the Black Lotus, why did he want to kill us?" Gue Wutsan's eyes flickered, and he asked in surprise, "What's more strange is, how did he know that we would come?" Jian Jingyan frowned and asked. Nyetian's face was gloomy. What Gue Wutsan and Jian Jingyan said was exactly what he was thinking at this time. It seemed that as soon as they entered the obscure mountain range, they were targeted by the Black Lotus. Faintly, Nyetian felt that he had walked into a huge trap. "Young master, let's go back first. The Black Lotus is mysterious and unpredictable. Now that we've been targeted by them, it will be difficult for us to go further into the dark mountain range." Jing Chun was stunned for a moment. Then he said, "Black Lotus was mysterious and powerful. No one knew how strong he was." Jing Chun did not care about his own life and death, but he felt the pressure. He was not completely confident that he could protect Nyetian. That black-robed cultivator from earlier was already very terrifying. However, it was not clear what position this person held in the Black Lotus sect. Who knew what kind of terrifying enemies Nyetian and the others would encounter next? For the sake of Nyetian's safety, Jing Chun wanted to return first and discuss with Jing Li before making any further plans. "No, we can't go back." Nyetian looked at Jing Chun with an extremely resolute gaze and said, "Since we have already come this far, of course we have to continue. I also want to know how the Black Lotus people know our whereabouts." Although Nyetian smelled the scent of a conspiracy, he was not someone who would give up easily. Since he had already taken the first step, no matter how difficult the road ahead was, he had to persevere. Jing Chun looked at Nyetian and felt the determination in the latter's eyes. He knew that it was useless to persuade him, so he did not speak anymore. Next, everyone rested for a while. After Jing Chen's strength recovered a little, they began to advance towards Black Wind Cliff. Along the way, Nyetian and the others were very cautious and careful, moving very slowly. Fortunately, the journey was smooth. After half a day, the figures of Nyetian and the others appeared on Black Wind Cliff. "Young master, this is Black Wind Cliff." Jing Chun pointed to a village below and said, "The people here are all madmen who kill without batting an eye. It's best if we don't provoke them." Nyetian nodded his head and no longer hesitated. His figure moved and directly landed outside Black Wind Cliff. Black Wind Cliff looked like a small town. Most of the people here had just arrived in the realm of darkness, so their divine senses were still clear. Black Wind Cliff was a place where people could enter and leave freely. Nyetian and the others did not encounter any obstacles and directly entered Black Wind Cliff. Walking on the street, Nyetian could feel the fierce gazes of the people around him, which were filled with cold, killing intent. Anyone who came to the domain of darkness came for the sake of slaughter, so they held great enmity towards others. The realm of darkness was a land of killing. Here, as long as you were strong enough, you could kill at will without being bound by any rules. This was a very frightening point, enough to make these bloodthirsty martial artists go crazy. Yet Tian and the others did not look strong, and they were very young. Originally, they would become easy targets for others to kill. But with Jing Chun by their side, most people would avoid Jing Chun in fear when they saw him. There were not many overgod martial artists in the realm of darkness, and late-stage overgod experts like Jing Chun were extremely rare. Walking on the street, he was a strong deterrent to others. "Young master, let's go to the Black Wind restaurant first. Maybe we can get some information there." Jing Chun followed beside Nietan, paying attention to every movement in the surroundings. He said, "But the Black Wind restaurant has an unspoken rule. No one is allowed to kill people there." Nietan nodded slightly, indicating Jing Chun to lead the way. A moment later, Nietan and the others arrived at the Black Wind restaurant. The Black Wind restaurant was called a restaurant, but it was actually a huge open-air square. Many people gathered together, eating and drinking and talking loudly. The overall atmosphere seemed good. Nietan was very curious. Who set the rule that no one was allowed to kill people in the Black Wind restaurant? Was it someone from the Black Lotus sect? Or was it a rule that everyone who came to the realm of darkness followed? Nietan found a relatively remote place to sit down. He was not in a hurry and was ready to listen to what the people around him were saying. Get lost. However, as soon as Nietan and the others sat down, a violent, angry roar rang out. Then, several figures walked over, all of them brimming with killing intent. Nietan raised his head and looked at them. Using his divine sense, he found that 3 of them were late-stage overgods, and the one leading was a peak overgod. The strength of these 4 people was indeed very strong. Gue Wuchan was immediately angered. He jumped to his feet, but was stopped by Nietan. "Let's go." Nietan smiled faintly. He turned around and left, preparing to find another place to sit. "Wait." That person sneered with disdain. Then he growled in a low voice, "You can scram, but this little girl has to stay behind to accompany me." With that, the person actually extended his hand, wanting to touch Rui Qinyu. "You're looking to die." Nietan could no longer hold back when he saw this. With a growl, forbidden inscriptions surged through his body. He released a sword move, directly attacking the person who had struck out. Even though the person was a peak overgod, he was caught off guard when Nietan suddenly struck out at such a close distance. Bang! With a muffled sound, the person was forced back a few steps, directly falling to the ground. The sudden turn of events immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nietan, their faces filled with astonishment. No one had thought that Nietan would actually attack here. What was this place? The Black Wind restaurant. All the people who came to the Black Wind restaurant knew that they could not fight here. This was the only rule in the Black Wind Cliff, and it was a rule that everyone had to follow. Chapter 1807. Little brat, how dare you attack me here? The man stood up and stared at Nietan viciously with a cold smile on his face. Nietan saw that the people around him were all staring at him with strong, killing intent. Nietan had broken the rules of the Black Wind restaurant, which made him the target of everyone. Nietan frowned. He didn't expect that these people would care so much about the rules of the Black Wind restaurant that forbade killing. Jing Chun saw this and frowned. He took a step forward and shouted cold, "Whoever dares to take half a step forward will die." Hearing the word die, everyone's hearts sank and their eyes trembled. They didn't dare to step forward. Nietan saw that there was someone in Jing Chunjun's residence. He took a step forward and looked at the person who provoked him. He asked cold, "Who are you?" The person who provoked him seemed arrogant, but there was definitely something strange about him. He knew that Jing Chun was powerful, but he still dared to provoke him. Seeing that Nietan had endured it, he attacked Rui Qinyu. Obviously, he wanted to provoke Nietan and make Nietan attack him. The person sneered. He didn't answer Nietan's question, but shouted, "Brothers, this brat has broken the rules of the Black Wind restaurant. Let's kill him together." "Kill him," everyone shouted in unison. They were actually itching to give it a try and make a move. Nie Tian frowned. He glanced at Jian Jingyun and Gue Wushan and said, "Do it." Boom. The next moment, Nie Tian, Jian Jingyun, and Gue Wushan attacked at the same time. 3 powerful sword wills whizzed out and instantly merged together, turning into a deadly sword shadow that rushed towards the person. Bang! The sword shadow whizzed past, and blood appeared in the air. The person didn't even have a chance to fight back. He died instantly. Wow! The others all took a deep breath in, and their eyes widened in fear. Who would have thought that not only did Nie Tian make a move, but he also directly killed someone? But no one moved because they didn't dare to move. "Young master, let's leave this place." Jing Chun retreated to Nie Tian's side and prepared to leave. However, Nie Tian had a strange look in his eyes as he said in a heavy voice, "I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to leave." Jing Chun was stunned as he did not understand what Nie Tian meant. "How dare you kill people in the Black Wind restaurant?" At this moment, a majestic voice rang out, after which a silhouette appeared in midair, exuding an aura as heavy as a mountain. At the same time, dozens of black figures appeared around the huge square. They arrived in an instant and surrounded the entire Black Wind restaurant. The person behind this has finally come out. Nie Tian's lips curled up as he mumbled. He had long since sensed the faint surge of killing intent in the surroundings. Moreover, the person who provoked him just now was also very strange. He was clearly trying to infuriate him and force him to attack. "Who are you people?" At this moment, the silhouette in midair descended slightly and looked at Nie Tian, his entire body surging with killing intent. Nie Tian looked at the silhouette in the sky, his face grim. "Who are you?" This person was very strong at the early paramount god level. His entire body pulsed with a terrifying aura. "I'm a master of the Black Wind Cliff, Xiang Tsang Xuan." Xiang Tsang Xuan said in a cold voice, "You killed people in the Black Wind restaurant, which is a taboo of the Black Wind Cliff. You deserve to die." The master of the Black Wind Cliff? Everyone was stunned when they heard Xiang Tsang Xuan's identity. Their eyes flickered violently. Most of them had no idea that the Black Wind Cliff had a master. The master of the Black Wind Cliff? Nie Tian looked at Xiang Tsang Xuan and laughed. "I really want to know if you, the master of the Black Wind Cliff, are from the Black Lotus? You're courting death." Xiang Tsang Xuan's eyes trembled when he heard Nie Tian mention the Black Lotus. His figure flickered, and he charged at Nie Tian. Nie Tian showed no fear. He shot in the sky and swung his sword to meet Xiang Tsang Xuan's attack head-on. Hm. Xiang Tsang Xuan's figure stabilized in midair, but his eyes were trembling. He hadn't expected Nie Tian to be so strong that he could take his attack head-on. "Young master, let me deal with him." Jing Chen couldn't help but worry for Nie Tian's safety when he saw Nie Tian and Xiang Tsang Xuan fighting. With a roar, he charged over. Although his strength hadn't recovered to its peak, it was more than enough to kill a puny Xiang Tsang Xuan. "Jing Chun, protect the others. Leave this person to me." Nie Tian suddenly waved his hand, indicating for Jing Chun not to interfere. Since Xiang Tsang Xuan claimed to be the master of Black Wind Cliff, it was very likely that he was related to the Black Lotus. Hence, he couldn't die. Xiang Tsang Xuan was stunned for a moment, but then he sneered, "Brat, you think you can fight me with just you?" The person he feared the most was Jing Chun, but he was very surprised that Nie Tian wouldn't let Jing Chun interfere. "You really want to kill me? Who told me to kill myself?" Nie Tian looked at Xiang Tsang Xuan and spoke in a cold voice. A black petal appeared in his hand as he said, "The owner of the petal told you to kill me, right? Black Lotus." Xiang Tsang Xuan's eyes widened when he saw the black petal in Nie Tian's hand. "Why do you have this?" Xiang Tsang Xuan never imagined that Nie Tian would have a black lotus. The black petal was called the Black Lotus and was the symbol of the Black Lotus. Within the Black Lotus, only those with a sufficiently high status, such as the 12 Lotus Lords, would have a Black Lotus. Nie Tian wasn't a member of the Black Lotus at all, So how could he have a black lotus? As I thought. Nie Tian frowned as he took in Xiang Sangxuan's reaction. He was now certain that the black lotus in his hand was the symbol of the black lotus, and that Xiang Sangxuan was a member of the black lotus. Xiang Sangxuan, are you surprised that I have a black lotus? Nie Tian became cold for a moment. The corners of his lips curled into a smile as he said, "The person who provoked me just now was arranged by you. You forced me to attack because you wanted a reason to kill me, right?" Xiang Sangxuan was taken aback, his face filled with shock. The person who provoked Nie Tian earlier was indeed arranged by him. He had forced Nie Tian to attack so that he could justifiably kill Nie Tian. "Xiang Sangxuan, you and I don't know each other. Why do you want to kill me?" Nie Tianling sneered as he continued to ask, "Who exactly is behind you?" Xiang Sangxuan couldn't have killed Nie Tian for no reason. There had to be a reason for him to do so. There had to be someone behind him. Nie Tian guessed that Xiang Sangxuan had been ordered by the Black Lotus to kill him. But this time, Nie Tian was wrong. Xiang Sangxuan's attempt to kill him was not ordered by the Black Lotus. There was someone else behind him. "Silver-haired kid, you're really smart." Right at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out and said in a low voice, "However, your path ends here. Today, you will die for sure." It's him. Nie Tian couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard the voice. It was a very familiar voice. Chapter 1808. Someone from the Zhou clan. "I didn't expect it to be you." Nie Tian couldn't help trembling when he saw Zhou Chuyang, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He originally thought that Xiang Sangxuan had been ordered by the Black Lotus to kill him, but it turned out that Zhou Chuyang was the mastermind. "Kid, are you surprised to see me?" Zhou Chuyang stepped forward, his aura surging. He glanced at Xiang Sangxuan with a playful smile and said, "I didn't expect to meet my former subordinate here." Xiang Sangxuan was indeed the master of Black Wind Cliff, but he was once Zhou Chuyang's subordinate before entering the darkness area. After Zhou Chuyang left the 7 dark cities, he had predicted that Nie Tian would enter the darkness mountain range. So he entered ahead of time and coincidentally found Xiang Sangxuan at Black Wind Cliff. Everything Xiang Sangxuan had done just now was under Zhou Chuyang's orders. Xiang Sangxuan looked at Zhou Chuyang and transmitted his voice, "My lord, this kid has a black lotus. I'm afraid it will be troublesome." Nie Tian taking out the black lotus caught Xiang Sangxuan off guard. Xiang Sangxuan was worried that Nie Tian might have some kind of relationship with the black lotus. Zhou Chuyang glared at Xiang Sangxuan, but didn't say a word. He didn't care about the black lotus in Nie Tian's hand. What he cared about was the earth vein source in Nie Tian's body. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Chuyang's eyes trembled. "Kid, I'll give you one more chance. Obediently return with me, and I'll keep you and your friends safe. How about it?" Nie Tianling sneered. "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? I won't live past a day if I return with you." Zhou Chuyang was very stubborn about the earth vein source. If Nie Tian returned with him, there would only be one outcome, death. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Zhou Chuyang's face darkened. Killing intent surged in his eyes as he growled, "Since you insist on dying, don't blame me. Without the city lord's intervention, let's see who can save you." As his deep voice fell, Zhou Chuyang's figure moved. The black sand around his body danced wildly, and his entire body turned into a sandstorm that swept towards Nie Tian. "Young master!" When Jing Chun saw the situation, he roared and dashed into the sky. Boom! However, at this moment, a roar suddenly sounded in the sky. A flaming arrow rolled over from the horizon, and its target was Jing Chun. "Jing Chun, be careful!" The sudden scene caused Nie Tian to be stunned, and he immediately cried out. It was obvious that the person who attacked was the spirit arrow martial artist from before. Nie Tian didn't expect this guy to appear at this time. Jing Chun sensed that something was amiss and sent out a palm strike. Thousands of thorns appeared in the air and instantly gathered together, forming a huge shield that enveloped Jing Chun. Boom! The flaming arrow landed and directly bombarded the shield around Jing Chun. The tens of thousands of thorns actually cracked inch by inch, and a scorching aura spread out, pressing down on Jing Chen. Di Shi Tian. At the critical moment, Nie Tian roared. Immediately, a golden light gushed out, followed by a sword shadow whizzing out, and actually smashed the flaming arrow in the air. Jing Chen's figure retreated thousands of meters away and stabilized himself. His entire body was dripping with blood, but his aura was still stable, and his life was not in danger. Damn it! Puff! Jing Chen roared angrily. His blood and qi attacked his heart. His body swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His strength was clearly not weaker than that spirit arrow martial artist, but the latter hid in the dark and launched a sneak attack, catching him off guard. Twice in a row, this spirit arrow martial artist almost took Jing Chen's life. Jing Chen, are you all right? Nie Tian flew over, looked at Jing Chen, and asked nervously. Young master, this subordinate is fine. Jing Chen took a deep breath, and the wounds on his body began to heal slowly. Nie Tian looked into the void. That spirit arrow martial artist did not appear. It seemed that after shooting an arrow, he left directly. Damn it! The next time I see this person, I will definitely kill him. Jing Chen's eyes were burning with anger as he growled out. What is it? On the other side, when Zhou Chuyang saw Sakura's figure, his pupils suddenly constricted, and he couldn't help but cry out with a face full of disbelief. The power of that sword just now was really strong. Zhou Chuyang never thought that the person who used this sword was actually a 5- or 6-year-old baby. I didn't see it wrong, right? That's actually a child? The people below were also stunned and cried out repeatedly, even suspecting that they had seen wrongly. Sakura's strength and appearance were really too discordant, and it brought a huge shock to everyone. Nie Tian, how should we deal with this guy? Sakura stepped on the golden centipede and didn't even look at Zhou Chuyang. Instead, he asked Nie Tian. Nie Tian's face was gloomy. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he spat out a word, kill. Zhou Chuyang followed him from Death's Ferry all the way here, wholeheartedly wanting to obtain the Terra Vein source. This posed a great threat to Nie Tian. Nie Tian didn't want this person to live anymore. When Sakura heard Nie Tian's words, his childish face darkened, and his large eyes shone with terrifying killing intent. Zhou Qian's expression flickered when he sensed Sakura's killing intent. It actually made him feel threatened. However, he was a late Paramount God, so he quickly regained his composure. You're only an early Paramount God, kid, he said coldly. You're only an early Paramount God. How are you supposed to fight me, a late Paramount God? I can kill you with a single palm strike. Is that so? Sakura's figure flickered, and as he hovered there in midair, the sword energy around him became so sharp that it seemed capable of ripping apart heaven and earth. His mouth twitched, and he said coldly, I only need one sword strike to kill you. You're courting death. How could Zhou Chuyang endure being ridiculed by a 5- or a 6-year-old child? He was instantly enraged, and with a low roar, his figure flashed. His entire body surged with black sand that surged without end, and the entire sky started to tremble. Zhou Qiang's figure had already disappeared. His entire body seemed to have become a black tornado, and within the tornado were black sand that looked like sharp blades. The violent black tornado was thousands of meters long, and the space around it was pulled taut, as if it would collapse in the next moment. How terrifying! The crowd below looked at the terrifying tornado in the sky, their eyes trembling as they exclaimed in their hearts. Sakura's figure stood tall in the air like a mountain. Facing the tornado that engulfed the heaven and earth, there was no fear in his eyes, only the most extreme killing intent. Heaven-slaughtering devil sword, blood scar. In the next moment, the corner of Di Shi Tian's mouth trembled, and he muttered. As his voice fell, the sword in his hand suddenly stabbed out. Instantly, a blood-red sword shadow whizzed out. It was like a red line. It was not vast, but the power and killing intent contained within it was terrifying. The blood-colored sword image pierced through the tornado, and the tornado suddenly stopped. Then it dissipated, and a figure appeared in midair. It was Zhou Chuyang. This. Zhou Chuyang realized something, and just as he opened his mouth, a red line appeared on his neck, and blood sprayed out. Chapter 1809. The moment Zhou Chuyang's head was cut off, countless eyes stared at the bloody scene in the air with trembling eyes and lifeless expressions. The scene fell into a deathly silence. Even the drop of a needle could be heard. Indra had killed Zhou Chuyang with a single sword strike. This scene was too shocking. To kill a late-stage paramount god with a single sword strike, such strength was truly terrifying. Nie Tian, who was watching from the side, was also stunned. The power of Sakura Heaven's sword was beyond his imagination. Indra had said before that his battle strength was above Zhou Chuyang's, but to kill the latter with a single sword strike was a little too terrifying. Zhou Chuyang, an elder of the Zhou family, had died in the darkness. Indra had killed Zhou Chuyang not only because of his terrifying battle strength, but also because Zhou Chuyang had been careless. He had thought that Indra's strength was only at the early stage paramount god level, so he hadn't taken him seriously. He hadn't even used his full strength in that palm strike just now, so he had died tragically. Indra's figure moved, returning to Nie Tian's side, but his cold eyes were locked on Xiang Sangxuan. As long as Nie Tian said the word, he could kill Xiang Sangxuan with a single sword strike. Nie Tian came to his senses and smiled faintly, looking at Xiang Sangxuan with a playful expression. Xiang Sangxuan's dazed expression finally eased a little. His mouth hung open, but he was unable to utter a single word. Xiang Sangxuan, let's find a place to talk, said Nie Tian with a faint smile. Xiang Sangxuan didn't feel any killing intent from Nie Tian. He breathed a sigh of relief and nodded repeatedly. He waved his hand to dismiss the black-clothed men around him. Since Zhou Chuyang had died at Indra's hands, Xiang Sangxuan didn't dare to act rashly. Very good, you're tactful. Nie Tian smiled coldly, then left the Black Wind restaurant with the others. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others landed in a valley outside the Black Wind Cliff. Nie Tian let Indra and Jin Tu return to the Nine Superbs. With Jing Chen around, Xiang Sangxuan wouldn't dare to play any tricks. Moreover, given Nie Tian's strength, even if the others didn't make a move, he wouldn't be afraid of Xiang Sangxuan. He estimated that Xiang Sangxuan's battle strength was below the Ghost King Palace Master. My lord. Xiang Sangxuan's voice trembled as he looked at Nie Tian. Xiang Sangxuan, I have some questions to ask you. Think carefully before you answer. Nie Tian icily stared at Xiang Sangxuan as he let out a sinister laugh. If you lie to me, I guarantee that you will not have an easy death. Xiang Sangxuan bowed and nodded. He felt a chill run down his spine as large beads of sweat beaded on his forehead. Yes. Please ask. I will definitely answer truthfully and will not dare to deceive you. Nie Tian smiled and nodded. A black lotus appeared in his hand and said, Do you recognize this black petal? Yes. Xiang Sangxuan glanced at the black petals and nodded. This is a black lotus, the symbol of the black lotus. Very good. Nie Tian confirmed the black lotus in his hand and immediately put it away. He looked at Xiang Sangxuan and coldly smiled. It seems that you, the master of Black Wind Cliff, are also from the Black Lotus. No, I'm not from the Black Lotus. Xiang Sangxuan suddenly raised his head to look at Nie Tian and repeatedly waved his hand. You're not from the Black Lotus? Nie Tian frowned. His face suddenly turned gloomy as he growled. You're not from the Black Lotus. How do you know about the Black Lotus? And how did you become a master of Black Wind Cliff? Xiang Sangxuan's face turned deathly pale. He gulped and said in a trembling voice, It's true that I'm the master of Black Wind Cliff, but I'm not qualified to join the Black Lotus. I only take orders from the Black Lotus. Speak clearly. Nie Tian frowned and shouted in a cold voice. Yes. Xiang Sangxuan repeatedly nodded in fear. His whole body was already drenched in sweat. The Black Lotus is a mysterious organization that controls the entire Darkness region. There are many places like Black Wind Cliff in the Gloom Mountain Range where martial artists who have just come to the mountain range gather. In order to control these places, the Black Lotus will appoint a manager. However, this manager is not from the Black Lotus, but must take orders from the Black Lotus. Hearing this, Nietian gradually understood that Xiang Tsangxuan was only someone chosen by the Black Lotus to manage Black Wind Cliff. He was not qualified to join the Black Lotus. Nietian frowned and asked in a cold voice, "Have you seen anyone from the Black Lotus?" "Yes." Xiang Tsangxuan nodded and honestly said, "Every half a year, the Black Lotus people will come to Black Wind Cliff and give me some pills. After taking these pills, I can resist the Blood Fiend runes for half a year." "So that's how it is." Nietian nodded. He was just wondering why Xiang Tsangxuan had not been swallowed by the Blood Fiend runes and turned into a slaughterer. It turned out that he had taken the Black Lotus pills. It seemed that the Black Lotus method of controlling the Darkness Realm was actually very simple. It was to build many martial artist gathering places like Black Wind Cliff in the Gloom Mountain Range, and then appoint a manager. As long as one controlled this manager, it was equivalent to controlling all the martial artists. These martial artists would kill each other, and in the end, they would be controlled by the Blood Fiend runes and thrown into the Gloom Mountain Range, becoming slaughterers like wild beasts. The entrance to the Darkness Realm from the God Sealing region, the Fairy of Death, opened once a month. Every time, tens of thousands of people would come in. These tens of thousands of people were the fresh blood that constantly poured into the Darkness Realm, causing the Darkness Realm to always exist in the midst of slaughter. Nietian guessed that there must be more than one entrance to the Darkness Realm. There might be other entrances in other domains. There were 9 cities outside the Gloom Mountain Range, which also implied that there should be 9 entrances to the Darkness Realm. Nietian's guess was right. There were indeed 9 entrances to the Darkness Realm, but he did not know about the other entrances. Gue Wuchan only knew that there was an entrance to the God Sealing region, so they directly came to the God Sealing region. Nietian looked at Xiang Tsangxuan and asked, "How much do you know about the Black Lotus?" Xiang Tsangxuan's eyes flickered in thought. Then he trembled and said, "I'm just a lowly master of Black Wind Cliff. I don't even know where the Black Lotus is." "Huh?" Nietian's face darkened, and killing intent surged in his eyes. My lord." Xiang Tsangxuan felt Nietian's killing intent and hurriedly said, "I know that the Black Lotus has a Black Lotus King. It is said that the Black Lotus King controls the entire Black Lotus. The Black Lotus King has 12 Lotus Masters under him, and every one of them is an extremely terrifying existence. The Black Lotus in your hand can only be possessed by someone at the Lotus Master level." "Black Lotus King, Lotus Master." Nietian frowned, and his expression changed continuously. A moment later, Nietian became cold and asked in a deep voice, "Let me ask you, do you know how to find the Black Lotus?" This. Xiang Tsangxuan's eyes flickered in thought, and he stuttered, as if unwilling to speak. "Speak." Nietian growled, a fierce look in his eyes. Xiang Tsangxuan was scared out of his wits. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, "My lord, if you want to find the Black Lotus, you must first obtain the Massacre Token." "Kill orders?" Nietian went blank for a moment before asking, "What's that?" Chapter 1810. The Path of Massacre. Nietian was taken aback once again. His expression darkened as he stared coldly at Xiang Tsangxuan. "Speak clearly." Xiang Tsangxuan's expression turned nervous. After taking a deep breath, he said, "The Path of Massacre is a massacre competition organized by the Black Lotus. I don't know what the Path of Massacre is like, but I heard that as long as you pass the test, you will be qualified to join the Black Lotus." Nietian's eyebrows furrowed as his mind raced. He never imagined that the Black Lotus would have a massacre competition. The martial practitioners that entered the Darkness region were all bloodthirsty people. Coupled with the existence of the Blood Fiend runes and a massacre competition, the entire Darkness region would descend into a state of massacre. Xiang Tsangxuan looked at Nietian and said, "Lord, you may be able to participate in the Path of Massacre if you want to find the Black Lotus, but you must first obtain a massacre token." Nietian's gaze trembled as he asked, "How do I obtain a massacre token?" Xiang Tsangxuan's eyes flickered in thought as he explained, Every gathering point has many massacre tokens, which are in the hands of the martial practitioners. As long as you can find a martial artist with a massacre token and kill him, you will be able to obtain the massacre token in his hands. Oh, Nye Tian frowned. If Xiang Cangshuan had not told him, how would he have thought that one had to kill to obtain a massacre token? Jing Chun, who was listening at the side, was also dumbfounded. He had stayed at Black Wind Cliff for nearly half a year, but he had never heard anything about the massacre writ. Nye Tian pondered for a moment before he asked, "How do I participate in the path of massacre after obtaining a massacre token?" Xiang Cangshuan nodded solemnly as he coldly said, "As long as you have a massacre token, the Black Lotus will come looking for you." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at Xiang Cangshuan and asked, "One last question. How do I find someone with a massacre token?" The massacre token was in the hands of the Black Wind Cliff martial practitioners, but he did not know who had it. Although Black Wind Cliff was not big, there were still more than 100,000 people. Nye Tian could not possibly kill them all one by one. This, Xiang Cangshuan hesitated before shaking his head. "I don't know either. I'll give you one more chance," said Nye Tian coldly, frowning. "Think carefully before you answer." I really don't know." Xiang Cangshuan shook his head repeatedly, his face drenched in cold sweat. Nye Tian's expression darkened as he stared at Xiang Cangshuan. It seemed that Xiang Cangshuan indeed did not know how to find someone with a slaughter token. This was a little troublesome. Even if they stood still and let Nye Tian search them, it would take at least a few months. Nye Tian did not have that much time to waste. "Nye Tian, what should we do now?" Looking towards Nye Tian, Gue Wukon asked with a helpless expression. Nye Tian let out a long breath and said, "We can only look around and try our luck." "My lord." Xiang Cangshuan suddenly opened his mouth, as if he had thought of something. "My lord, perhaps the Black Lotus in your hand can help you find the slaughter token." Nye Tian was slightly taken aback, but quickly understood. Xiang Cangshuan had just said that the people of Black Lotus would come looking for him as long as he had the slaughter token. This meant that the people of Black Lotus had a special method to sense the slaughter token. Since the Black Lotus was the symbol of Black Lotus, it might be able to sense the slaughter token. "Xiang Cangshuan, you can leave now." The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly, indicating that Xiang Cangshuan could leave. Xiang Cangshuan was taken aback, his eyes involuntarily trembling. He was very worried that Nye Tian would kill him when he was not paying attention. Jing Chun frowned as he stepped forward and asked, "Young master, are you really going to let him go?" Xiang Cangshuan knew too much, and it would be extremely disadvantageous to Nye Tian and the rest if it was leaked. "It's fine, let him go." Nye Tian did not seem to care at all. He smiled faintly and allowed Xiang Cangshuan to leave. Xiang Cangshuan was not a member of Black Lotus and had no idea how to find them. Moreover, even if he did find someone from Black Lotus, there was no way he would tell Nye Tian and the rest. He had told Nye Tian too many things, and if the people of Black Lotus found out, he would be the first to die. Nye Tian believed that Xiang Cangshuan was a smart person and would not do anything foolish. After Xiang Cangshuan left, Jing Chun looked towards Nye Tian and asked, "Young master, what should we do next?" In Jing Chun's opinion, it was already very amazing that they could find out so many things right after arriving at Blackwind Cliff. All of this was thanks to Zhou Chuyang. If not for him, Xiang Cangshuan would not have appeared. Nye Tian smiled faintly as he looked at the Black Lotus in his hand and said, "Let's first confirm whether the Black Lotus can sense the slaughter token." Next, Nye Tian and the rest left the valley and returned to Blackwind Cliff. As they walked on the street, Nye Tian could not help but feel a little excited as he looked at the Black Lotus. They had walked more than half the street, but there was no movement from the Black Lotus. Could it be that the Black Lotus has no ability to sense the slaughter token? Nye Tian frowned and thought to himself, if that was the case, it would be really difficult for them to find the slaughter token. At this moment, Jian Jingyun suddenly opened his mouth, his eyes flickering with a strange light as he muttered, "If you have the slaughter token and are afraid of others snatching it, what would you do?" Everyone was taken aback, not quite understanding what Jian Jingyun was trying to say. Gui Wuchan frowned and replied, I would find a safe place to hide. Right? Jian Jingyun laughed and said, What is the safest place in Black Wind Cliff? Nie Tian was taken aback again, but he immediately reacted and blurted out, Black Wind Restaurant. The safest place in Black Wind Cliff was definitely the Black Wind Restaurant, because it was the only place where killing was not allowed. Smart. Nie Tian looked at Jian Jingyun with a smile at the corner of his mouth and muttered, If I had a kill command, I would definitely stay in the Black Wind Restaurant. That's right. Gui Wuchan, as if awakened from a dream, suddenly shouted, patted Jian Jingyun's shoulder, and said with a mischievous smile, I couldn't tell that you, this guy, are quite scheming. Let's go to the Black Wind Restaurant. Nie Tian nodded excitedly and directly went to the Black Wind Restaurant. After a while, everyone arrived at the Black Wind Restaurant. At this time, the Black Wind Restaurant had already returned to normal. The appearance of Nie Tian and the others did not cause too much of commotion, and many people had already forgotten about them. What these people remembered was the 5 or 6 years old Tian. Nie Tian walked bit by bit, carefully observing the reaction of the Black Lotus. At this time, he suddenly saw the Black Lotus suddenly flash. Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, unable to conceal the excitement in his eyes. He immediately stopped and carefully observed everyone within 10 meters of him. He sensed bit by bit, and finally, he locked his target on a martial artist dressed in green. It's him. Nie Tian stared at the martial artist dressed in green and walked step by step. With every step he took, the Black Lotus flashed more and more intensely. Chapter 1811. Nie Tian's eyes shone brightly as he looked at the flickering Black Lotus. The Black Lotus really was wondrous. It could sense the existence of the Decimation Medallion. However, this sense was not very powerful. It was evident that the Black Lotus was not specially used to sense the Decimation Medallion. It was just that there was some connection between the two, so it could sense it. Nie Tian stowed the Black Lotus away after confirming that the cultivator had the Decimation Medallion. He slowly made his way over to the cultivator and directly sat down. The cyan-clothed martial artist was taken aback. Then, he looked at Nie Tian and stared at him with eyes like those of a ferocious wolf. Intense killing intent flashed in his eyes as he said in a deep voice, Get lost. Clearly, the cultivator treated Nie Tian as someone who was purposefully provoking him, so he directly released his killing intent to force Nie Tian to leave. However, Nie Tian smiled faintly. He scanned the cultivator with the senses of his soul. The man's killing intent was very strong. His eyes were slightly scarlet, and he reeked of blood. Moreover, he was not weak. He was a peak-over god. Nie Tian could sense that the talismans of fiend's blood in the man's body were extremely dense, to the point where he was almost out of control. He guessed that the man's senses would be devoured by the talismans of fiend's blood in half a month if nothing went wrong. He would become a mindless slaughterer. I'll say it again. Piss off. When the azure-robed man saw that Nie Tian had no intention of leaving and was instead sizing him up with a playful expression, he couldn't help but feel a little angry. With a low roar, he released a strong killing intent from his body and directly enveloped Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He secretly released a presence and blocked the man's killing intent without batting an eyelid. The man was suddenly stunned. He had never thought that Nie Tian would be so powerful. Originally, he was surprised. Nie Tian was only a mid-high god, so it was impossible for him to resist his killing intent. However, he had never thought that Nie Tian would be able to nullify his killing intent so easily without even noticing. What are you trying to do? The azure-robed man's cold eyes turned slightly red, but he still suppressed the anger in his heart. After all, this was the Black Wind Restaurant, and he couldn't simply start a fight. Help you? Nie Tian faintly smiled. You're a smart person, so you should have already sensed that there's a murderous energy surging in your body, causing you to constantly want to kill. Only by killing can you feel satisfied, right? Nyetian could tell that this azure-clothed man was a person with a firm temperament. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to resist the blood fiend symbols for so long. The azure-robed man's eyes darkened and his expression changed. Recently, he did feel that his desire to kill was getting stronger and stronger to the point where he was about to lose control of it. Only killing could make him feel satisfied. However, he knew that he was not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. He came to the domain of darkness only to gain experience. He could faintly feel a kind of power entering his body, slowly changing his will. However, he did not know what this power was. He did not know how to expel this power from his body. He was curious as to how Nyetian could tell this. Could it be that he knows how to restrain my desire to kill? The azure-clothed man frowned slightly, and his expression suddenly changed. He looked at Nyetian with a burning gaze. I think we can talk now. Nyetian looked at the azure-clothed martial artist's reaction and asked with a smile, What's your name? Yu Filong. The azure-clothed man felt that Nyetian did not have any ill intentions, so he instantly relaxed and said in a deep voice, Yu Filong? Nyetian was stunned when he heard the name. He then laughed and said, You're from the Yu family? The Yu family was one of the 9 great creation families. The heartbroken young master that Nyetian met in the astonishing territory was from the Yu family. The heartbroken young master had helped Nyetian before, so he had a good impression of the Yu family. Yes. Yu Filong nodded and asked, Who are you? What did you mean when you said you could help me? Nyetian smiled faintly and said, My name is Nyetian. When I said I could help you, I meant to help you expel the blood fiend runes from your body. Blood fiend runes? Yu Filong was stunned. He had never heard of such a thing. There were many secrets in the realm of darkness, such as the blood fiend runes, the Black Lotus, the Massacre Order, and the Massacre Path. Only a few people knew about these secrets, but the people of the realm of darkness did not communicate with others, so it was difficult for these secrets to be spread. Most people could feel the existence of the blood fiend runes in the later stages, but they did not know what kind of power it was. The Dark Mountain Range is filled with blood fiend runes. These runes constantly invade the bodies of cultivators and devour their divine consciousness. The desire to kill in your body comes from the blood fiend runes. Nyetian nodded and explained, As long as I can expel the blood fiend runes from your body, you will no longer have such a strong desire to kill. Yu Filong froze for a moment, his face slightly stiffening. Then, he became startled and said, Why should I believe you? You must believe me because you have no other choice. Nyetian smiled faintly and released an overbearing confidence from his body. He said, I think you've seen a lot of slaughterers, killing machines that only have the desire to kill. If you don't want to become a slaughterer, then you must believe me. Yu Filong was stunned. He did not expect Nyetian to be so domineering. He felt a terrifying self-confidence from Nyetian. This was not a temperament that an ordinary person could show. Yu Filong indeed had no other choice. He felt that the slaughterer's power in his body was getting stronger and stronger. If he did not expel the blood fiend runes from his body, he would soon become a slaughterer. Have you made up your mind? Nyetian looked at Yu Filong and said lightly, If you have made up your mind, then come with me. Yu Filong looked at Nyetian and then glanced at the few people behind Nyetian. His eyes were still a little hesitant, as if he was worried about something. You are wondering why I'm helping you, right? Nyetian looked at Yu Filong and smiled. He did not beat around the bush and said directly, I am helping you because I want something from you. What is it? Yu Filong was suddenly stunned. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he became obviously nervous. The killing order, Nyetian said in a deep voice. Yu Filong's eyes trembled and his face was obviously stiff. He said in surprise, How did you know? Yu Filong could not understand why Nyetian knew that he had the killing order. The killing order was a secret. Not many people in the entire Dark Mountain Range knew about it. Yu Filong looked at Nyetian and immediately understood that the latter had come for the killing order. Yu Filong, don't be nervous. Nyetian smiled and said, What I want is the killing order, not your life. You have 2 choices now. The first one is that we help each other. You give me the killing order, and I will help you force out the blood fiend runes. As for the second choice, I will kill you and get the killing order. Chapter 18:12. Yu Feilong's eyes flickered with unconcealable nervousness. He wasn't too afraid of Nie Tian, but the people behind Nie Tian terrified him, especially Jing Chun, who had the strength of a late paramount god. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry. He calmly looked at Yu Feilong, waiting for him to make a decision. After Yu Feilong calmed down, Nie Tian asked, "Have you made up your mind?" Yu Feilong calmed down and said in a low voice, "I'll go with you." In fact, he had no choice but to help Nie Tian. Nie Tian rose to his feet and turned around to leave. There were too many people in the Black Wind restaurant, so there were some things that couldn't be done here. Nie Tian and the others left the Black Wind restaurant and came to a dense forest near the Black Wind cliff. "Let's do it here." Nie Tian spread out his senses to make sure there was no one around, then stopped. Next, Nie Tian didn't waste any time. He immediately used his demon god power to force out the blood fiend runes for Yu Feilong. All right. Nie Tian took a deep breath and withdrew his divine and devil power. His tense expression eased considerably. Yu Feilong didn't find anything different about his body, but he could clearly feel the desire to kill in his heart disappear. His mind was calm, and the ruthlessness in his eyes was gone. "Yu Feilong, I've done what I promised you. It's your turn." Nie Tian let out a breath of turbid air and looked at Yu Feilong. Yu Feilong nodded, then took out a black command medallion and handed it to Nie Tian, saying, "This is the kill medallion you asked for." Nie Tian took the token and sent his divine sense into it. Sure enough, he sensed an aura that was very similar to the Black Lotus. Immediately afterwards, Nie Tian examined the kill medallion with rapt attention and discovered that it contained some information about its uses. It was similar to what Xiang Tsangxuan had said. The massacre token was the key to enter the path of massacre, and only by obtaining the massacre token would one have the right to participate. However, the next piece of information made Nie Tian abruptly freeze. The slaughter order had not been activated yet, and it required 13 more blood traces to activate. 13 blood traces? What do you mean? Nie Tian frowned with a puzzled expression. Yu Feilong took a step forward and explained, "When I just obtained the massacre medallion, the medallion indicated that it can only be activated after absorbing 100 blood traces. Blood marks are something formed by the condensation of a cultivator's blood chi. Only cultivators from the domain of darkness have blood marks. So, 100 blood traces are equivalent to the lives of 100 martial artists." Nie Tian's expression changed slightly as he said solemnly, "Yes." Yu Feilong nodded and said, "If you want to activate the massacre medallion, you must let the medallion absorb 100 blood traces." Nie Tian's eyes involuntarily tightened. The massacre medallion in his hand still needed 13 blood traces to activate. It seemed that Yu Feilong had already killed 87 people. Nie Tian didn't pay much attention to it. After all, most of the people who came to the realm of darkness were here to kill. In this place, if you didn't kill, you would be killed. Killing a few dozen people wasn't a big deal. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, "What happens after the massacre medallion is activated?" "I don't know." Yu Feilong shook his head. He indeed did not know what would happen after the massacre medallion was activated. But he had always wanted to kill people, and after killing them, the blood traces in their bodies would automatically dissipate and be absorbed by the massacre medallion. Nie Tian's consciousness once again carefully scanned the massacre medallion, not missing a single detail. At this time, he really found that the massacre medallion had 100 thin blood-colored slots. 87 of them were filled with blood traces, and the remaining 13 were empty. And above the blood-colored slots was a cluster of densely packed runes. Nie Tian sensed a very strong space-time aura from these runes. It seemed that these runes contained a space-time array. Nie Tian looked at the massacre medallion in his hand, and his eyes flickered. This small medallion contained a lot of hidden mysteries. "Yu Feilong, I really want to know, how did you get the massacre medallion?" Nie Tian put away the massacre medallion, then looked at Yu Feilong and asked doubtfully, Well, I just arrived at the Black Wind Cliff. A black-robed man gave it to me. Euphylon nodded and said, I don't know that black-robed man. After he gave me the medallion, he directly left without saying anything. Nietion's face sank as he carefully pondered. He guessed that the person who gave Euphylon the massacre medallion was most likely someone from the Black Lotus. He reckoned that there were many people in the Black Wind Cliff who had obtained the massacre medallion like Euphylon. In order to activate the medallion, these people who possessed the massacre medallion had to constantly kill people, making the entire Dark Realm more bloody. The Black Lotus was indeed a terrifying organization. Nietion even suspected that the Blood Fiend runes in the Dark Mountain Range were also the doing of the Black Lotus. Euphylon, you should leave the Dark Realm. Nietion became cold and said to Euphylon. Euphylon also looked at Nietion. After hesitating for a long time, he finally nodded. He came to the Dark Realm to gain experience. It was best for him to leave now. Young master, you should return to the Dark Seven Cities. The city lord there is my elder brother. He will help you leave the Dark Realm. Jing Chun said to Euphylon with a faint smile. Many thanks. Euphylon bowed and thanked him. After saying goodbye, he did not stay any longer and turned to leave. His figure moved, and he flew into the air. Nietion looked at Euphylon's figure and smiled faintly. Euphylon leaving was the best outcome. However, at this moment, Nietion suddenly sensed something. His pupils shrank and his face darkened. He shouted, Euphylon, be careful. Boom, boom, boom. Almost at the same time as his voice sounded, more than a dozen flaming arrows suddenly fell from the sky. Each arrow was thousands of meters long. They connected in the air like a sea of fire that was tens of thousands of meters wide. They pressed down on Euphylon aggressively. Euphylon was in midair. When he saw the sudden scene, his face darkened, and his eyes began to tremble. He forcefully released the aura of his entire body and struck out with his palm. A mighty palm shadow appeared, but it seemed extremely insignificant in the face of the sea of fire that covered the sky and covered the earth. Nietion sensed that something was wrong. He frowned and rushed over, but he was still a step too late. Boom! Endless booms rang out as the sea of fire expanded, directly swallowing Euphylon's figure. He did not even have the chance to cry out in the end. Euphylon! Nietion could not help but become furious at the sight before him. He roared out and unleashed all of his sword force. He stood in the air like a sharp sword, a murderous sword. Nietion stared at the empty space with a sunken gaze as killing intent surged from his body. A while later, the sea of fire dispersed, and over a dozen figures in black appeared in the air. Every single one of them possessed powerful presences. They were all peak overgods. Chapter 18:13. In the air, Nietion's eyes locked onto the dozen men in black with a stern expression. These people had killed Euphylon in front of him. Who are you? Nietion asked with a strong, killing intent in his voice. One of the black-clothed men stepped forward without the slightest bit of nervousness and said lightly, Congratulations on becoming the new Slaughtering Hand. The Slaughtering Hand? Nietion frowned, but his aura kept rising. The black-clothed man actually laughed and said, Those who have the slaughter order are the Slaughtering Hand. The Slaughtering Hand is qualified to participate in the Slaughtering Road. Once you come out of the Slaughtering Road, you will be the Slaughtering King. The Black Lotus welcomes you at any time to become the Slaughtering King. Nietion frowned slightly and immediately understood that these people in front of him were from the Black Lotus. Without a doubt, the slaughter order in Euphylon's hand was given by these people. Why do you want to kill him? Nietion's eyes darkened and he asked coldly. The path of slaughter is the secret of the Black Lotus. It must not be taken away. The man in black's voice became low and said, He knows too many things, so he must not be allowed to leave the dark mountain range alive. Nietion frowned and said coldly, According to what you said, if I become the new Slaughtering Hand, I won't be able to leave the dark mountain range alive. Not necessarily. The man in black was very calm and said, As long as you can win the path of slaughter and become the Slaughtering King, you will be qualified to leave this place. Here, The man in black paused and said, "But if you want to enter the path of slaughter, you must first activate the slaughter order. The slaughter order in your hand still needs 13 blood marks to be activated. Hurry up." After saying that, the man in black turned around and was about to leave. "Wait." Nyetian took a step forward and his sword aura rose up. His eyes were cold and stern. "Did I say you can leave? What do you want?" The man in black was stunned for a moment. Feeling Nyetian's killing intent, he said, "Don't tell me you still want to kill us? Do you know that we are the Black Lotus envoys?" The Black Lotus emissary was a small title, but it represented a powerful status. It was precisely because of his identity that the black-clothed man did not put Nyetian in his eyes at all. He did not believe that Nyetian would dare to kill him. The Black Lotus emissary? Nyetianling let out an indifferent smile. The disdain in his eyes intensified as he said in a heavy tone, "I don't care who you are. I only know that you kill my friend. So all of you must die today." A voice that was as cold as iron resounded in the void, surging with terrifying killing intent and battle intent. These Black Lotus envoys had killed you Phylong. So how could Nyetian let them leave alive? "Do you really want to kill us?" The man in black frowned slightly, and a trace of horror finally appeared on his face. "You're right. My decimation medallion is still lacking 13 blood runes. Then I'll use your lives to fill those 13 blood runes." With a sinister smile, Nyetian's decimation medallion appeared in his hand. Terrifying black runes surged out of his body as he used his 3 forbidden arts at the same time. At the same time, his tri-evil sword vein began to circulate. Wild sword intent surged in the air, filling the surrounding 10,000 meters with a terrifying killing intent. The black-clothed man frowned slightly. Nyetian's strength had exceeded his expectations. "Die!" Nyetian roared, slashing down with the starlight heaven slash. A mountainous sword image tore through the sky like a collapsing pillar, shaking heaven and earth. The black-clothed man's eyes widened, and the fear on his face intensified. He wanted to fight back, but found himself surrounded by a powerful sword aura that made it difficult for him to even circulate his key meridians. Nyetian was currently a late overgod. Coupled with the tri-evil sword seal, a single strike from him was enough to slay an early overgod. The black-clothed man was only a peak overgod. There was no way he could withstand a single strike from Nyetian. Boom! The sword image fell, and the black-clothed man's body was swallowed up by the sword intent. Not even his bones were left, and he was reduced to a bloody mist. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Nyetian would actually dare to kill an emissary in the obscure mountain range. In the instant that the black-clothed man died, a thin streak of blood-red light appeared and entered the decimation medallion. One of the slots was instantly filled to the brim. "What?" The other men in black all took a deep breath in. They were all frightened. They couldn't believe that Nyetian had killed an emissary just like that. Furthermore, Nyetian's strength was extremely strange. He had instantly risen from mid-overgod to late overgod. He killed an emissary. Let's attack together and kill him. However, these envoys were experienced cultivators and quickly calmed down. They roared in unison and launched attacks at the same time. In the next moment, an incomparably vast and mighty aura appeared and crashed down on Nyetian like raging waves. Nyetian's face sank. There was no fear in his eyes at all. Instead, his battle intent became even more intense. He took a step forward, and his blood chi stimulated his sword intent, causing his sword aura to soar once again. Following that, the astral heavenly slash slashed down, and boundless sword intent instantly condensed into a 5,000 to 6,000 meter long sword image. The boundless sword intent seemed to have solidified as it slashed towards the dozen Black Lotus envoys. The emissaries were stunned. They had never thought that Nyetian would be so powerful. He was actually able to take on the combined attacks of over a dozen peak overgods all by himself. Young Master, Jing Chun was stunned as well. He was unable to react for a moment. He growled out and wanted to strike out again, but it was too late. rumble. In the next moment, the two extremely terrifying powers collided. Immediately, the shockwaves exploded and spread out in all directions. The entire sky was enveloped by the terrifying power. Jian Jingyun and the others were completely stunned by the scene in the sky. Nietion's battle prowess was unbelievable. It was unimaginable. Jian Jingyun knew that he could take on 2 or even 3 peak overgod cultivators at the same time. However, he definitely could not take on a dozen peak overgod cultivators all by himself like Nietion had done. Nietion was just too terrifying. It was chilling. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Rumbles and ear-piercing sounds constantly rang out in the sky. Terrifying power wreaked havoc in the space, causing waves of air to explode. A long while later, the surging waves of air dispersed, and 2 figures appeared in the sky. Nietion stood in the air as sword intent surged around him. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He seemed like a sword that could kill. On the other side, the emissaries were in an extremely horrible shape. Blood flowed from the corner of their lips, and their faces were filled with shock and embarrassment. They looked at Nietion in shock and fear. It had never occurred to them that they would be defeated by Nietion, even though they had joined forces. Nietion was unscathed, but they were all injured. How is this possible? A while later, someone returned to their senses and cried out. Their faces were still stiff. Chapter 1814. Boom. In the void, the sword's shadow was like a mountain pressing down on the group of Black Lotus cultivators. In an instant, all the Black Lotus cultivators felt an immense pressure to the point where they felt like they couldn't breathe. At this moment, the smell of death was so real. Boom! However, at this moment, a flaming arrow appeared in the sky, whistling over like a huge meteor. Nietion suddenly felt the pressure, and his eyes darkened. Then, astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he retreated. Boom! In the next moment, there was an explosion as the mighty sword shadow and the flaming arrow collided. A terrifying shockwave exploded, turning into surging shockwaves that spread in all directions. The frightening power filled the space within 10,000 meters. Nietion felt the terrifying pressure, and his figure retreated. He finally avoided the direct impact, but he was still affected by the aftershock. His body swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. You again. Nietion steadied himself, and he suddenly raised his head to look at the black-robed figure in the sky. It was the spirit arrow warrior who had appeared twice before. This was the 3rd time the spirit arrow warrior had appeared, and every time he appeared, it was to kill. The first 2 times were against Jing Chun, and this time, it was against Nietion. The Black Lotus envoys retreated, and after stabilizing themselves in the air, they all looked at the spirit arrow warrior and cried out in unison, Lotus Master! Lotus Master? Nietion was taken aback, and then he remembered that Xiang Tsangxuan had told him that the Black Lotus had a Black Lotus King and 12 Lotus Masters. So this person was one of the 12 Black Lotus Masters. The Black Lotus was indeed terrifying. A mere Lotus Master had the strength of a late-stage paramount god. It seemed that the Black Lotus King had the strength of a peak paramount god. Such a deep foundation was comparable to the peak forces of the upper 3 realms. Just as Nietion was feeling bewildered, Jing Chun rushed to Nietion's side and asked nervously, Young Master, are you all right? Nietion nodded slightly, indicating that he was fine. Far in the sky, the Lotus Master saw that Nietion was not dead and couldn't help but frown. He obviously did not expect Nietion's martial body to be so strong. Nietion used the 3 forbidden techniques, and his strength reached late over God. His martial body strengthened as well, becoming even more powerful than experts like Jing Chun. It's you again. I, Jing Chun, will definitely kill you today. After confirming that Nietion was fine, Jing Chun roared and charged towards the Lotus Master. He had almost died at the hands of this Lotus Master twice. His hatred for the latter was obvious. He wished he could tear the latter into pieces before burning his bones to ashes. Jing Chun. When Nietion saw Jing Chun rushing over, He was worried that the latter would have an accident, so he shouted and then transmitted his voice to Sakura. "Sakura, go and help." "Okay." Sakura agreed. His small figure appeared and flew toward Jing-chun. Jing-chun had not fully recovered his strength yet, so it was rather difficult for him to deal with the Lotus Master alone. However, with Sakura, it was more than enough. Tian no longer paid any attention to the Lotus Master. His murderous gaze locked onto the envoys of Black Lotus. "Brothers, this kid has been injured by the Lotus Master. Let's kill him together." The expressions of the envoys changed, and one of them cried out. His aura surged, causing the space there to tremble slightly. "All right." The other envoys roared out at the same time. They thought that Tian must have been quite injured from the clash with the Lotus Master. Now is the best time to strike. "You're looking to die." Tianling's eyes flickered with cold light. He roared out and then slashed out, sky-devouring blood. The presence of blood and sword intense surged. A blood-red sword appeared in the air and slashed towards the envoys. When the envoys saw this, they all struck out. Over a dozen strands of power fused into one, condensing into a terrifying palm that fell. In that instant, the sky changed color and dark clouds surged. Kaboom! The moment the sword and palm collided, terrifying power wreaked havoc. With a violent explosion, it was like a clap of thunder. Immediately, surging waves of air swept out, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. Jian Jingyun and the others tensed up. Their hearts leapt to their throats, and they even forgot to help out. Hiss, 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 hiss. Piercing sounds constantly rang out in the surroundings. The surging waves of air only dissipated after a long time. A figure stood in the air like a god of death, descending upon the world. However, the envoys of Black Lotus had vanished. They had all been swallowed up by the sword, all dying a horrible death. With just a single strike, Tian had directly slain over a dozen peak-over gods. Such terrifying battle prowess was shocking. Jian Jingyun and the others were completely stunned. They were stunned, and they were speechless for quite a while. Spurt. At that moment, Tian's figure swayed, and he actually spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. Tian had used up all his strength to kill over a dozen Black Lotus envoys. He had used up a lot of blood, and his body was already in a weakened state. He took a deep breath and withdrew his aura. The forbidden skill rune then disappeared. At that moment, Tian glanced at the massacre medallion in his hand. It was flashing with a strange, blood-red glow. He sensed that the 100 blood-red slots in the massacre medallion had already been filled. The 100 blood-red lines had been successfully absorbed, and the rune had been activated. Tian did not have the time to look at it. He immediately put the massacre medallion away and turned his attention to the other battlefield. High up in the sky, 3 figures were fighting fiercely. Under the combined attack of Sakura Tian and Jing-chun, the Lotus Master could no longer hold on. She was covered in blood, and her body was trembling. However, she was still fighting on her last breath. "I'll kill you!" Jing-chun roared and slammed his palm down. Tens of thousands of thistles and thorns appeared and condensed into a terrifying sharp claw in the air, slamming down on the Lotus Master. The Lotus Master was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If this palm fell, she would definitely die. "Don't kill him." Seeing this, Tian's eyes could not help but turn gloomy, and then he screamed. Jing-chun wanted to retract his palm when he heard Tian's words, but it was too late. Boom! At the critical moment, a sword shadow appeared and fell from the sky, directly shattering the giant palm in the air. That was close. Jing-chun let out a long sigh of relief. He glanced at Sakura Tian and nodded slightly. If not for Sakura Tian's timely intervention, the Lotus Master would have been killed by Jing-chun's palm. "Young Master!" Jing-chun shouted when he saw Tian's figure appear. He asked doubtfully, "Why didn't you kill him?" Tian smiled faintly and locked his gaze on the Lotus Master. He said playfully, "He's one of the 12 Black Lotus Masters. He must know a lot of things. Killing him just like that would be too easy on him." Chapter 18:15. The master of the Lotus sect stared at Nyetian with a gloomy look on her face. Even if he were to die, he would not reveal any information about the Black Lotus to Nyetian. You sure have guts. Niet Tianling snickered as the corner of his lips curled up. His eyes darkened, and he said in a low voice, I don't want to know about the Black Lotus. Why don't you tell me why you are here? As soon as he spoke, a wave of sword energy shot out and pierced through the Lotus leader's shoulder. Fresh blood gushed out. Niet Tian didn't have the habit of torturing people. However, if the Lotus leader didn't know what was good for him, he had no choice but to do it. Niet Tian really wanted to know why the Lotus leader was here to kill him. Also, the Lotus leader's target was very clear. It was obvious that he was here for Niet Tian and the others. The Lotus leader screamed in pain. His voice was extremely sharp, but he gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. You're not going to say anything? Niet Tian snickered coldly. Another wave of sword energy shot out, and another bloody hole appeared on the Lotus leader's body. You want me to speak with just some physical pain? What a joke. The Lotus leader guffawed as his face turned ferocious. Ordinary physical pain was indeed nothing to a martial artist with a firm and determined mind. However, the two bloody holes that Niet Tian left on the Lotus leader's body weren't that simple. Since you aren't afraid of physical pain, let me show you the power of the forbidden technique rune. Niet Tian smiled faintly. Then, with a thought, a mass of talisman symbols appeared in his palm and entered the body of the Lotus Master. What did you do to me? The Lotus leader was extremely shocked, and his eyes trembled as he shouted. Don't panic. You'll find out soon enough. Niet Tianling snickered. In the next moment, the forbidden technique rune turned violent and rushed into the Lotus leader's body. The Lotus leader screamed in pain. The Lotus leader's entire body twisted and contorted. It was as if there were thousands of ants biting his body and soul, trying to tear his body and soul apart. This pain was beyond the Lotus Master's imagination. His spiritual consciousness was on the verge of collapsing. Stop right now. The Lotus Master screamed and begged for mercy. Now, can we have a good talk? Niet Tian smiled faintly, his eyes flashing with coldness. The power of the forbidden technique rune was indeed not something an ordinary person could withstand. Back when Niet Tian was fusing with the forbidden rune, the pain he endured was far greater than what Lotus Lord had endured, but he managed to endure it with his strong willpower. It turned out that Niet Tian's fusion with the forbidden rune was of great help to him. Without the three forbidden magics, he would have a hard time fighting godlords, let alone paramount gods. Speak, Lotus Master. Why do you want to kill me? Niet Tian smiled coldly, his eyes filled with disdain. Fiend god nascent embryo. The Lotus leader spoke in a low voice. Immediately after, a strange energy gushed out of his body. Not good. Niet Tian's eyes grew grim as he realized something. However, it was already too late to make a move. Bang! A muffled sound rang out, and the Lotus leader's body exploded into a pool of blood. The Lotus leader was a man of integrity. He would rather self-destruct than reveal any information to Niet Tian. But before he died, he uttered 4 words. Fiend god nascent embryo. Niet Tian's heart sank, and his expression flickered. A god devil nascent embryo. He had never imagined that the Lotus leader would know about the fiend god nascent embryo. Don't tell me he's trying to kill me because of the fiend god nascent embryo. Niet Tian frowned, his eyes flashing. He couldn't figure out how the Lotus leader knew about the fiend god nascent embryo. Even as Niet Tian was wondering what was going on, something else was happening in a hidden valley in the Dark Mountain Range. A figure stood in the middle of the valley, his entire body hidden in darkness. His entire face radiated an aura of darkness. At this moment, the figure's aura was restrained, but his cold eyes were trembling slightly, as if he was extremely agitated. Old Nine is dead. After a long time, the figure murmured. His tone was filled with shock and disbelief. The Old Nine he mentioned was the Lotus leader who had just self-destructed. He was ranked 9th among the 12 Lotus leaders. He didn't expect the Lotus leader to be dead. This person's identity was terrifying. Within the Black Lotus, his status was second only to the Black Lotus King. He was the leader of the 12 Lotus Leaders and was known as the Lotus Leader. The death of the Lotus Leader had shocked the Lotus Leader. Although the Lotus Leader wasn't the strongest among the 12 Lotus Leaders, his assassination skills were definitely the best. A few days ago, the Lotus Leader had gone to kill Nyetian. The Lotus Leader had thought that the Lotus Leader would be able to complete the mission quickly. He didn't expect the Lotus Leader to die on the mission. Who is the person that the Black Lotus King wants to kill? And what is the fiend god nascent embryo that the old Nine mentioned before he died? The Lotus Leader frowned, his eyeballs moving around in a strange manner. Killing Nyetian was a direct order from the Black Lotus King. The Lotus Leader couldn't understand what kind of person could make the Black Lotus King care so much. Let's leave this place first and report everything to the Black Lotus King. After thinking for a long time, the Lotus Leader moved and left the valley. On the other side, Nyetian frowned. He faintly felt that he had fallen into a huge trap. "Young master, are you all right?" Jingchen asked when he saw that Nyetian's expression wasn't right. Nyetian shook his head slightly and forced a smile. Everything that had happened in the obscure mountain range was getting weirder and weirder. This made Nyetian feel pressured. When Socrateon returned to the 9 Superbs, Nyetian took out the massacre order. His eyes flickered and he murmured, "The massacre order has been activated. Young master, we have just killed the people of the Black Lotus. Do we still have to participate in the massacre path?" Jingchen stepped forward and asked Nyetian. "Yes." Nyetian nodded. Their purpose in entering the obscure mountain range was to find the ghost Marshal Wild Sand. Before they found him, they had to continue. Nyetian had a vague feeling that there might be a huge secret hidden in the massacre path. Let's see what happens after the massacre order is activated. Nyetian calmed down and stopped thinking about other things. He used his divine sense to explore the massacre order and immediately locked on the activated rune. Boom! Nyetian moved his mind. The rune in the massacre order sensed it and immediately released a ray of light. The light spread in the air and formed a spherical formation with a radius of several meters. Nyetian was stunned. He felt a strong space-time aura from the formation. His expression changed, and he said in astonishment, "This is a space-time formation." Space-time formation? The others were stunned, and their eyes revealed surprise. Who would have thought that there was a space-time formation hidden in the massacre order? "Young master, where does the space-time formation lead to?" Jingchen asked Nyetian with a puzzled look. Nyetian's eyes flickered, and he murmured, "If I'm not wrong, this space-time formation leads to the massacre path." The massacre path. Jingchen and the others were stunned, and their faces were obviously stiff. Chapter 1816. Nyetian looked at the space-time formation in front of him. His eyes trembled slightly and released blazing rays of light. He was a little surprised that there was a space-time formation hidden in the massacre token. He guessed that the space-time formation in front of him must lead to the path of massacre. "Young master, are we going to enter the space-time formation?" Jingchen was a little excited and asked nervously. He had stayed in Black Wind Cliff for more than half a year and had not found any information. Nyetian had only been here for a day and had actually found the way to the path of massacre. It was really too surprising. With a faint smile, Nyetian said, "There's no need to rush." With a thought, he withdrew the space-time portal into his slaughter command. Nyetian put the massacre token away and swept his eyes across Jingchen and the others. He frowned and seemed to be thinking about something. Now that the massacre token was activated, Nyetian and the others could enter the path of massacre. However, he had to think clearly about what to do next. Nyetian speculated that a massacre token could only allow one person to enter the path of massacre. So the question in front of him now was whether or not he should find a few more medallions of slaughter. Nyetian had the 9 extremities in his hands, so he could let others enter the 9 extremities. After thinking for a long time, Nyetian made a choice. He was going to find 2 more massacre tokens and give them to Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan respectively. As for Jingchen and Rui Qianyu, they would enter the 9 extremities first. Nyetian did not understand the path of massacre at all. so he had to make the most cautious arrangements. This is a small world that I created. It's called the Nine Extremities. Nietian took out the nine extremities, and with a thought, a space-time passage appeared. He looked at Jing Chun and Rui Qianyu and said, Jing Chun, Qianyu, you two enter the nine extremities first. Yes. Jing Chun was stunned at first and then understood. It turned out that Sakura had been hiding in the nine extremities. He nodded in agreement and stepped into the space-time passage, entering the nine extremities. Rui Qianyu nodded and entered the nine extremities as well. In the nine extremities world, there were exotic flowers and plants everywhere, and the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth and the spirit energy were even denser than in the outside world, which was extremely helpful to Jing Chen's recovery and Rui Qianyu's cultivation. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan were stunned as they watched from the side. They could feel the powerful space-time aura of the nine extremities. It was hard to imagine that Nietian could actually control such a powerful world. The nine extremes were created by Nietian. On the cosmos lines of the nine extremes world, Nietian's soul imprint was left behind. Naturally, he could control the nine extremes. Nietian, what should we do? Gue Wukan took a step forward, excitement appearing on his face. He was very glad that he had come to the realm of darkness with Nietian. If he had been by himself, it would have been impossible for him to reach this step. Let's go find two slaughtering orders first. Nietian faintly smiled and said, the three of us need 3 slaughtering orders. As for the remaining 2, we need to get them as soon as possible. Nietian had just killed more than a dozen Black Lotus envoys. Moreover, a Lotus Master had also died here. The people from the Black Lotus would arrive soon. It was not a good idea to stay here for long. All right, let's go to the Black Wind restaurant. There must be someone with a slaughtering order there. Gue Wukan smiled mischievously. He turned around and prepared to go to the Black Wind restaurant. There's no need to go. Just as Gue Wukan turned around, Nietian called out to him. With a strange smile, he said, someone has delivered a slaughtering order to our doorstep. As he spoke, Nietian looked towards a dense forest. The corner of his mouth curled into an evil smile. Nietian sensed that the 100 blood traces on the slaughtering order had suddenly reacted. It was as if they had sensed something and became extremely violent. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukan were stunned on the spot. They couldn't sense anything. They're here. Just as they were feeling puzzled, a violent roar suddenly rang out from the distant forest. Following that, a figure rushed over. In an instant, he was less than 1,000 meters away from Nietian and the others. In the next moment, 2 black-clothed figures appeared behind this person. 2 pairs of cold eyes stared at Nietian and the others with heavy killing intent. So the slaughtering orders can also sense each other. Nietian smiled faintly. He immediately understood that these people were here for the slaughtering orders in his hands. Just now, Nietian felt that the slaughtering orders had become extremely violent. So it turned out that it sensed other slaughtering orders. There really is a slaughtering order. The person in the lead smiled coldly. He took a step forward and released a powerful aura from his body. His eyes were slightly blood-red. The bloodthirsty killing intent was extremely dense. The leading black-clothed person glanced past Nietian and the others with a sunken gaze. He said coldly, damn brat, if you're smart, call out the slaughtering orders. Don't force me to take action. Nietian raised an eyebrow. His gaze was extremely disdainful. He did not take the 3 of them seriously at all. The 3 black-clothed people were all peak over gods. Unfortunately, their opponent was Nietian. Kid, looks like you're forcing me to kill someone. The man in black growled and sneered. You only have 2 peak over gods, while we have 3 peak over gods. You want to fight back with just you? You're looking to die. With that, he waved his hand, and the other 2 stepped forward. Their auras surged, and killing intent appeared in their eyes. Nietian laughed. He looked at Gue Wukan and said, I'll leave these 3 to you. All right, Gue Wukan replied. He took a step forward, and sword force surged from his body. The 3 black-clothed people were suddenly stunned. Seeing that only Gue Wukan was going to attack, they They could not help but look at each other and snigger. This brat is looking to die. The three of them did not hesitate and directly attacked. Three surging palm force shot towards Gue Wukong. Gue Wukong's lips curled into a cold smile. He suddenly stabbed out with the Octotera Ghost Martial Sword, and a deep sword seal rang out in the air. Afterwards, the sword blur shot over like a dragon. Boom! There was an explosion in the air, and the three figures were all sent flying. The leading black-clothed person died on the spot. The other two black-clothed people gasped when they saw this. They immediately turned around and fled. Gue Wukong sneered. He moved and stabbed out with his sword. Two sword blurs fell and directly ended the lives of the two black-clothed people. Although the three of them were peak over gods, there was a huge gap between them and the Black Lotus envoy from before. Nietian and Jian Jingyan watched from the side. They could not help but look at each other and exclaim together, "The realm of the Sword of Oblivion." Gue Wukong instantly killed three opponents of the same level. It was not only because he was powerful, but also because he had just advanced to the realm of the Sword of Oblivion. Not long ago, Gue Wukong was still at the realm of Sword Essence. Unknowingly, he had actually reached the realm of the Sword of Oblivion. His talent in the way of the sword was astonishing. The current Gue Wukong's battle prowess should be similar to Jian Jingyun's. At most, he was slightly weaker. Gue Wukong sniggered and took a step forward. He raised his hand, and 3 massacre medallions appeared in his hand. They only needed 2 massacre medallions. Now that they had 3, there was one more. Chapter 1817. Different. Nietian couldn't help being stunned when he heard Gue Wukong's words. He quickly walked over and held the 3 slaughter orders in his hands. After comparing them, he found that they were indeed different. The 3 slaughter orders looked similar on the surface, but the patterns on their backs were different. Nietian then took out the slaughter medallion that had been injured and compared it to his own. The pattern on its back was also different. These patterns were very strange. At first glance, they looked similar, but after careful observation, there was a huge difference. Nietian, can you tell what these patterns are? Gue Wukong looked at Nietian for a long time, but he couldn't tell what these patterns were. Nietian shook his head and said, "These patterns seem to be some kind of rune. I've never seen such a thing before." "Fat, have you seen this pattern before?" Nietian asked Fat Cat. "I've never seen him before." Little Fat Cat replied coldly. Nietian was stunned. He looked at Fat Cat. The latter's face was solemn, as if she was thinking about something. There was a faint trace of fear in her eyes. Nietian was puzzled. He had never seen Fat Cat with such an expression. This wasn't the latter's character. Could it be that Fat saw something? Nietian guessed in his heart, but Fat Cat wasn't willing to say, so he couldn't do anything. Since he couldn't understand the patterns on the back of the slaughter orders, Nietian could only give up and let Gue Wukong keep the slaughter orders. Nietian faintly felt that the patterns on the back of the slaughter orders must be hiding some secret. Otherwise, Fat Cat wouldn't have such a reaction. After getting the slaughter orders, Nietian no longer hesitated. With a thought, the space-time array appeared. "Let's enter." Nietian nodded with a smile and stepped into the space-time array. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukong followed behind him. The instant the 3 of them entered the space-time formation, space trembled slightly, and the 3 of them disappeared. In the hinterland of the Dark Mountain Range, there was a dark city. The huge city gate was like a giant beast with its mouth wide open, wanting to swallow everyone who entered. At this moment, 3 figures appeared in midair, looking down at the dark city below with shock and astonishment. These 3 people were none other than Nietian, Jian Jingyun, and Gue Wukong. "What is this place?" Gue Wukong asked in astonishment as he looked around. Nietian calmed down a little. He stared at the dark city below and said, "Let's enter the city first." The city below was extremely vast. It had a circumference of 1,000 miles, and the city walls were hundreds of meters tall. Furthermore, they were made of black stone, causing the darkness aura in the city to be even denser. Nietian and the other 2 landed outside the city gate. Nietian was also very curious about where they had come to. He originally thought that he would directly appear in the path of slaughter. Slaughter City, standing outside the city gate. Yet Tion's eyes couldn't help flickering as he saw the 4 large words on the city gate. So the city in front of him was called Slaughter City. Slaughter City, what a bloody name. Gue Wuxian couldn't help frowning as he looked at the 4 words. Nye Tion's expression was gloomy as he walked towards Slaughter City. When he was about 1,000 meters away from Slaughter City, Nye Tion's expression slightly changed. He could sense that Slaughter City was enveloped by a huge formation. Although the aura of this formation wasn't obvious, it gave people a feeling of boundlessness. Stop! At this moment, a low voice rang out on the city wall. Following that, a guard appeared and coldly stared at Nye Tion and the others. He said in a deep voice, "Who are you people?" Nye Tion slightly creased his brows. He didn't say a word and took out the mandate of slaughter. When the guard saw the mandate of slaughter, he couldn't help but sneer and said, "Envoy Black Lotus Insight is getting worse and worse." He actually gave the mandate of slaughter to a high god trash. Open the city gate. Nye Tion creased his brows. He didn't pay attention to the guard's ridicule and said in a deep voice. At this moment, a few people in the same attire appeared beside the guard. "Kid, Slaughter City isn't that easy to enter. Only experts who have truly experienced the baptism of slaughter are qualified to enter Slaughter City." One of the guards shouted, "A trash like you should just die." As he spoke, the guard's figure suddenly moved. He directly leapt off the city wall and sent a palm strike directly at Nye Tion. Nye Tion's gaze froze. He completely didn't expect that this guard would directly attack him. The people of Slaughter City would never give you a reason. If they wanted to kill, they would kill. They did not need a reason. You're looking to die. In the next moment, Nye Tion's eyes turned cold. Killing intent filled his eyes. Since the guard wanted to kill him, there was no need for him to show mercy. The guard was not powerful. He was only a late overgod. He really had no idea where he found the courage to kill so arrogantly. Unfortunately, he was very unlucky this time. The person he encountered was Nye Tion. Nye Tion shuddered, and forbidden inscriptions surged from his body. Endless dragon aura surged out, and he threw a punch. The figure of a dragon appeared and surged out. The dragon's might shook the sky. Boom! There was a great rumble in the air. The figure of the dragon surged into the sky and directly swallowed the guard. A blood-red light appeared in the air. The guard did not even have the time to let out a final howl before he died. Even a piece of trash like, "You can enter Slaughter City. Why can't I?" Nye Tion suddenly raised his head. The corner of his lips twitched, and his gaze was so cold that it was chilling. The guards on the city walls were completely stunned when they saw this. They looked at Nye Tion with trembling eyes as shock was written all over their faces. "Open the city gates." At this moment, Nye Tion looked at the guards and said sternly, Slaughter City was protected by terrifying formations, so he could not barge in forcefully. He needed to open the city gates before he could enter. This brat killed Liang Chung. Only now did the guards return to their senses. They cried out as fear filled their eyes. Nye Tion frowned. He looked at the guards and growled, "Open the city gates. Brat, you've killed our people. Do you still want to enter Slaughter City?" One of the guards finally calmed down. He looked sinisterly at Nye Tion and roared, "Brat, you can't enter Slaughter City. You'd better obediently prepare to die." Nye Tion's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't know what this guard meant. At this time, a horn suddenly appeared in the guard's hand. A cold, killing intent rose from the corner of his mouth. "Liang Shan, what are you doing?" The other guards panicked when they saw this. They shouted, "The slaughter horn cannot be used carelessly. If it alarms the herd of beasts in the mountain range, we'll be finished." "Don't worry, I'm just playing with them." The guard called Liang Shun smiled coldly and immediately blew the slaughter horn. Whoa! A deep and powerful bugle horn resounded, spreading towards the mountain range surrounding Slaughter City. Nye Tion frowned. He did not know what this Liang Shun was doing. "Brat, obediently accept your death." After a while, Liang Shun put down the horn and glared venomously at Nye Tion. Chapter 1818. Outside of Slaughter City, Nye Tion suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the distant mountains. His face changed, and he knew something was wrong. "Nye Tian, what's going on?" Jian Jingyun and Gue Wushan asked nervously when they saw Nye Tian's strange expression. Nye Tian frowned and turned to look at the mountains behind him. Bang! 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 Then a rapid and low muffled sound rang out, as if there was a huge wild beast running wildly. "What's that?" Gue Wushan suddenly saw a huge black shadow in front of them. It was like a mountain, and it was crazily rushing towards them. "Be careful. Get ready to attack," Nye Tian said with a gloomy face. "There's more than one." In the next moment, Jian Jingyun also realized that something was wrong. In the distance, behind the huge black shadow, two more black shadows appeared. Three black shadows rushed over, and the ground was raised into the sky by tens of meters. What a strong aura! Nye Tian felt a strong pressure, and he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Then, he finally saw the faces of the three black shadows. They were three huge black apes, and they were about 100 meters long. Their bodies were pitch black, and their fur was glossy. They were surrounded by a terrifying and ruthless aura. The strangest thing was that the black apes had 4 eyes, and each eye was surging with a terrifying and violent aura. The black apes' bodies weren't big, and many spiritual beasts were bigger than them. But their aura was very strong, and their bodies seemed to be made of steel. They looked like black mountains. Nye Tian guessed that the black apes were rank 6 or 7 divine beasts, and their strength was comparable to a peak over god, or even an early paramount god. It turned out that the guard named Liang Shun had used the slaughter horn to attract the black apes. Stinking brat. That's a 4-eyed, ferocious ape, a real rank 7 divine beast, and its strength is comparable to an early paramount god. Let's see if you can survive. Ha! Liang Shun stood on the city wall and laughed out loud. He could already see Nye Tian and the others being torn into pieces by the 4-eyed violent ape. Nye Tian didn't have the time to pay attention to Liang Shun. His eyes were fixed on the largest 4-eyed, ferocious ape. Black runes gushed out from his body, and his aura continued to rise. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan had also locked onto a 4-eyed ferocious ape and were prepared to take action. The guards on the city walls all stared at Nye Tian. They could sense that Nye Tian's strength was rapidly increasing. In just the blink of an eye, he had gone from mid-high god to late over god. This strange scene caused the guards to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. They had no idea how Nye Tian did it. Bang! 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 At this time, the 4-eyed violent ape was getting closer and closer to Nye Tian and the others. The sword moves around Nye Tian's body, surged like tempestuous waves, violent and murderous. Roar! The largest 4-eyed violent ape let out a thunderous roar. It suddenly slammed its 4 hooves, causing the ground to sink a little. Its huge body leapt up, and its 2 huge claws glowed with a cold light as they slammed towards Nye Tian. The 4-eyed violent ape was a 7th-ranked divine beast. Its body was extremely tough. Even a mountain would be flattened if it were to land on it. Nye Tian's expression was calm. His eyes were like a cold lake, without the slightest ripple. Earth and deceit. Just when the 4-eyed violent ape reached the highest point, Nye Tian let out a deep roar. Sword intent instantly condensed around his body, and a blur of a sword whistled out. It was like a huge dragon, and it slammed towards the 4-eyed violent ape. Rumble! With a loud sound, the blur of the sword struck the 4-eyed violent ape's body. The ape's body froze slightly, and it stopped in the air. Afterwards, it directly passed through the blur of the sword and slammed towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian frowned. The astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he retreated several thousand meters away. Kaboom! The 4-eyed violent ape landed on the ground, and the ground shook violently. A huge crater appeared, and a rolling wave of earth spread out in all directions. At the same time, Nye Tian landed on the ground. He waved his hand, and the earth around him scattered, and he stared at the 4-eyed violent ape. At this moment, the 4-eyed violent ape's 4 eyes were staring at Nye Tian. Their blood was red, and they were filled with a bloody, killing intent. Nietion's previous attack was extremely powerful. It was enough to instantly kill a peak over god, and even heavily injure an early-stage paramount god. However, it hadn't hurt the four-eyed violent ape. Not only was the four-eyed violent ape powerful, its defense was even more terrifying. Nietion estimated that the four-eyed violent ape's strength was comparable to a peak over god or even an early-stage paramount god. However, its defense was even stronger than a mid-stage paramount god. Even if Nietion used his 3 great forbidden skills, he still wouldn't be able to harm the four-eyed violent ape. Nietion glanced at Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan. The four-eyed violent ape they were facing was slightly weaker, and they could still resist it. However, if the battle dragged on, they wouldn't be able to hold on. Nietion didn't want Jingchun or Sakura to appear. There were too many people here. If they knew that he had something like the 9 extremities, it would be very troublesome. Roar! At this time, the four-eyed violent ape roared. Its huge body leaped up again, and it opened its bloody mouth, pressing down on Nietion. Nietion's figure moved nimbly. He stabbed out with his sword, and with the momentum of the sword, he retreated several thousand meters. When the guards on the city wall saw Nietion and the others fighting bitterly, they didn't smile. Instead, they were deeply shocked. They didn't expect Nietion and the others to be able to hold on for so long against the four-eyed violent ape, especially Nietion. Just now, he was mocked as a piece of trash, but now he could actually fight against the most terrifying four-eyed violent ape. Nietion relied on his nimble figure to dodge the four-eyed violent ape's attacks several times. However, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan were gradually falling into a disadvantageous position, and they couldn't hold on much longer. The four-eyed violent ape became more and more ferocious as it fought. The tyrannical aura on its body became more and more frightening, and its battle power kept rising. "We can't go on like this." Nietion frowned, and his expression was gloomy. The four-eyed violent ape's defense was too strong. Even if Nietion used his full strength, he wouldn't be able to cause any damage to it. Do I really have to let Sakura take action? Nietion pondered in his heart, and his eyes flickered. Nietion, the four-eyed violent ape's weakness is its eyes. Get close to it and destroy its eyes. At this time, the fat cat's voice suddenly sounded, reminding Nietion. Eyes. Nietion's eyes lit up, and he immediately stared at the four-eyed violent ape's 4 eyes. Roar! The four-eyed violent ape let out a low roar, and its huge body pressed over once again. Its speed and aura were much stronger than before. However, this time, Nietion didn't dodge. The astral soul wings on his back flapped, and his silhouette was like the wind and lightning, rushing straight towards the four-eyed violent ape. Huh? Is this brat crazy? The guards on the city wall were stunned when they saw this scene, and they exclaimed in horror. From their point of view, Nietion's action was no different from courting death. As Nietion neared the four-eyed violent ape, he instantly felt the terrifying aura rushing towards him. The skin on his body directly split open, and fresh blood flowed out crazily. He was only a few meters away from the four-eyed violent ape. At such a close distance, the strength of the impact was unimaginable. Chapter 18-19. In midair, Nietion approached the four-eyed ferocious ape and used his physical body to resist the impact of the four-eyed ferocious ape's aura. Suddenly, he stabbed out with his sword, and a cold sword shadow exploded towards the four-eyed ferocious ape's 4 eyes. The moment the sword shadow shot out, the four-eyed ferocious ape seemed to have sensed danger. It let out a strange howl, and its blood-red eyes revealed a terrified expression. Its huge body actually wanted to retreat. But unfortunately, Nietion was too close to the four-eyed ferocious ape. At this distance, how could he miss? Pooh! 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 The moment the sword shadow landed on the four-eyed ferocious ape's face, the sword intent burst forth like thousands of sharp blades, piercing into the four-eyed ferocious ape's eyes. Immediately, the four-eyed ferocious ape's 4 eyes exploded, and flesh and blood splattered everywhere. An incomparably ruthless aura was released filling the air. Nietion's sword strike had succeeded. He forcefully unfurled the wings on his back, and his figure immediately retreated 1,000 meters away. Oh! The four-eyed ferocious ape's 4 eyes exploded, and it immediately let out a deafening howl. Its huge body actually stood up, and its 2 front claws covered its face. It was an incomparable pain, and its body violently jumped around, causing the ground to rumble and tremble. When the guards on the city wall saw this scene, they were simply dumbfounded. They couldn't believe their eyes, and they all looked at the crazy 4-eyed ferocious ape with sluggish expressions. After a moment, the 4-eyed ferocious ape's huge body slowly fell, and finally fell into a pool of blood, no longer moving. Nietion stood in midair, and when he saw this scene, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief, and his tensed face relaxed a lot. He forcefully rushed to the 4-eyed ferocious ape's side, and his own injuries weren't light. Fortunately, the 4-eyed ferocious ape was finally dead. Jian Jingyun, Gui Wushan, the eyes of the 4-eyed ferocious ape's weakness. Nietion looked at Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan and shouted to remind them. The other 2 4-eyed ferocious apes were smaller, and their strength was also relatively weaker. Nietion didn't need to do anything, and Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan could also kill them. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan immediately nodded their heads and attacked simultaneously. 2 sword shadows shot out at the same time towards the 2 4-eyed ferocious apes. They went straight for the 4-eyed ferocious ape's eyes. Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan were both swordsmen who had reached the level of sword oblivion. Combined with their peak overgod strength, they were strong enough to fight early paramount gods. Pooh! As the 2 sword shadows fell, the sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard in the air, followed by the hysterical howls of the 4-eyed violent ape. The 2 violent apes roared, but their bodies were trembling. They struggled a few times with great difficulty before finally falling to the ground and dying in a pool of blood. Huff! Jian Jingyun and Gui Wushan looked at each other before exhaling a mouthful of turbid air. The 2 of them moved and arrived at Nietion's side. When they saw him covered in blood, they asked in panic, "Nietion, are you all right?" "It's nothing. It's just a flesh wound." Nietion smiled faintly. He circulated the devil essence in his body, and immediately, a powerful life force was released. The wounds on his body healed in an instant. After fusing the devil essence with the earthstring essence, Nietion had a monstrous recovery ability. As long as it wasn't a fatal injury, he could recover in an instant. After recovering his martial body, Nietion looked at the guards on the city wall and bellowed, "Open the gates." The guards were completely stunned. Their expressions were stiff, and they couldn't react for a long time. They never thought that Nietion and his group would actually kill 3 4-eyed ferocious apes. Let's open the gates," one of the guards said nervously, his eyes trembling. Yes, let's open the gates. He has the order to kill. We should have let him in long ago." Another guard nodded frantically. "We can't open the gates." However, the guard called Liang Shun growled, "This brat is ruthless. He has already killed Liang Cheng. If we open the gates, he will definitely kill us." The other guards' expressions changed when they heard Liang Cheng's words. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. If they had known that Nietion and his group were so powerful, they wouldn't have dared to provoke them even if they had 100 gallbladders. They were only small guards of Slaughter City. In the Black Lotus, they were the lowest and most lowly existences. Even if Nietion killed them, it wouldn't be a big deal. Nietion had the order to kill, and his current identity was the Hand of Slaughter. He was about to enter the path of slaughter. His status was much more important than a group of small guards. Then what should we do? The other guards looked at Liang Shun in unison, their faces filled with fear. Since we've already made our move, we'll do it to the end. Liang Shun's expression was gloomy. His eyes flickered with a malicious light. He took out the horn of slaughter again and said coldly, "I want to see how many 4-eyed ferocious apes they can kill." "Liang Shun, are you crazy?" The other guards were stunned, their eyes filled with fear. Liang Shun clearly wanted to use the Horn of Slaughter to attract even more four-eyed ferocious apes. However, four-eyed ferocious apes were extremely violent divine beasts. If they accidentally attracted a group of four-eyed ferocious apes, after killing Nietian and his group, they would very likely attack Slaughter City. If that really happened, even if these guards had 10,000 lives, it wouldn't be enough to kill them. Liang Cheng is my younger brother. I must get revenge. Liang Shun's eyes widened. He stared fixedly at Nietian, his expression extremely malicious. It turned out that the guard Liang Cheng who had provoked Nietian and was killed by Nietian with a single sword strike was Liang Shun's younger brother. No wonder Liang Shun's killing intent towards Nietian was so heavy. Woo! Liang Shun hardened his heart and directly blew the Horn of Slaughter. Nietian looked at Liang Shun. His face couldn't help but sink, his eyes revealing a cold, killing intent. It was fine if this person didn't let them enter the city, but he actually used this kind of despicable method to kill them. He really deserved to die. Stinking brat. Let's see if you can survive this time. Liang Shun put down the Horn of Slaughter and stared at Nietian with a sinister gaze. He spoke in a cold voice. As the horn sounded, a moment later, a huge wave of earth rose up in the distance. A large number of huge black shadows appeared. They were like black tornadoes, sweeping towards Nietian and his group. Nietian looked over. There were dozens of four-eyed, ferocious apes madly rushing over. A terrifying aura shook the heaven and earth. Waves of violent energy surged out, causing the ground to tremble as if it was about to collapse. Liang Shun, The other registered guards looked at Liang Shun in shock. They clearly didn't expect the latter to be so ruthless and attract dozens of four-eyed, ferocious apes at once. The most frightening thing was that these dozens of four-eyed, ferocious apes were each more than 100 meters tall. Obviously, they were even more powerful. This time, Liang Shun hardened his heart. He definitely had to kill Nietian. Dozens of four-eyed, ferocious apes. Such a formation, even a paramount god martial artist would be terrified if they saw it. Liang Shun predicted that this time, Nietian would die without a doubt. Nietian looked at the surging aura, his face as gloomy as water. With so many four-eyed, ferocious apes, it was impossible for Nietian and his group to block them with just their strength. In the current situation, he only had one choice, and that was to let Di Shi Tian and Jing Chun take action. Chapter 1820. Nietian frowned as he looked up at the black-clothed figure in the sky. He didn't know when the black-clothed man had appeared, but Nietian hadn't noticed him at all. Just then, the black-clothed man's aura fluctuated, which was why Nietian had sensed his presence. At this time, the black-robed man's silhouette suddenly moved. Immediately after, he violently punched out with his palm. In an instant, a gigantic palm silhouette appeared in the sky. It rumbled like heavenly thunder as it smashed towards the four-eyed, ferocious apes. Get out of the way. Nietian sensed the unfavorable situation. With a bellow, he stamped his feet, flapped his wings, and jumped thousands of meters into the air. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan also leaped into the air at the same time. Rumble! The palm fell from the sky like a mountain, emitting a thunderous rumble. On the ground, the charging four-eyed, ferocious apes suddenly sensed something and looked up. Their huge bodies slowed down. At that moment, the mighty palm fell directly into the midst of the four-eyed, ferocious apes. Rumble! Crack, crack, crack! The ground within tens of thousands of meters cracked, and in the blink of an eye, waves of earth shot up into the sky. Nietian was shocked by the scene in front of him. He hadn't expected the black-clothed man's palm to be so terrifying. The guards on the city wall were petrified, and their mouths were wide open, but they couldn't make a sound. After a long time, the waves of earth dissipated, revealing a 10,000-meter-wide pit in the ground. The corpses of dozens of ferocious apes lay scattered in the pit, all dead. One palm, just one palm, and dozens of ferocious apes had been killed. Looking at the scene in front of him, Nietian sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes trembling. The defense of the four-eyed ferocious apes was even stronger than that of a mid-stage paramount god. The fact that the black-clothed man had killed dozens of them with a single palm was terrifying. There was no doubt that the black-clothed man was at the peak of the paramount god level. Nyetian suddenly looked up at the black-clothed man in the sky. The man was hidden under a black robe, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. However, the aura he emitted was as vast as the mountains and seas. Nyetian was tens of thousands of meters away from the black-clothed man, but he could clearly sense the latter's aura. At that moment, Nyetian's pupils suddenly shrank, as if he had sensed something, and his expression flickered. He sensed a familiar aura from the black-clothed man. It was Yi Qinghai's aura. "Elder Hai!" Nyetian exclaimed inwardly, his body trembling slightly. He could clearly sense Yi Qinghai's aura from the black-clothed man. When Yi Qinghai left the divine realm of the heaven realm, he went to the region of darkness. However, Nyetian sensed that, although the aura of the black-robed man was very similar to Yi Qinghai's, there were also significant differences. Therefore, he couldn't tell whether the black-robed man was Yi Qinghai or not. A voice suddenly rang out in Nyetian's mind. It was the black-clothed man. "It's really you, Elder Hai." Nyetian's eyes trembled as he looked at the black-clothed man. Nyetian was taken aback. His eyes trembled as he looked at the black-robed man. "It's really you, Elder Hai." Nyetian's perception was correct. The black-clothed man in front of him was none other than Yi Qinghai. "Young master, I can't see you right now, but remember what I said. You must become the king of carnage." Yi Qinghai transmitted again. Then, as if sensing something, he said, "Someone's coming. This old servant has to leave." With that, Yi Qinghai's body flickered, and he vanished. "Elder Hai!" Nyetian's eyes flickered as he called out inwardly. However, Yi Qinghai had already disappeared. Nyetian stared at the place where Yi Qinghai had disappeared. He could not help but frown as he began to ponder over Yi Qinghai's words. Yi Qinghai did not seem to be willing to reveal his identity. Hence, he could not meet with Nyetian. He warned Nyetian that he must become the king of carnage. King of Carnage. Nyetian had heard of this name before from the Black Lotus envoy. People who possessed the Carnage mandate were called the Hand of Carnage. And the Hand of Carnage had the qualifications to participate in the Path of Carnage. Only by walking out of the Path of Carnage could one become the King of Carnage. The Black Lotus envoy even said that after becoming the King of Carnage, one would have the qualifications to join the Black Lotus. Yi Qinghai told Nyetian that he must become the King of Carnage. Just what did this mean? Nyetian pondered hard. He guessed that Yi Qinghai must have discovered something. Hence, he could not meet with him. Just what did Elder Hai discover? Nyetian's eyes flickered. Then, his expression changed. He cried out in his heart. Could it be that Elder Hai discovered Father's whereabouts? The more he thought about it, the more Nyetian felt that it was possible. If Yi Qinghai didn't want to show himself and meet with Nyetian, then the only possibility was that he had found some clues about Nye Fenghua, but had no way of confirming them. Nyetian nodded. "I don't care about that for now. Since Elder Hai wants me to become the King of Carnage, then I'll just participate in the Path of Carnage." He had originally come to the Domain of Darkness to find Ghost Warrior Wild Sand. Never could he have imagined that he would run into Yi Qinghai here. At that point, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wushan arrived at Nyetian's side. Gue Wushan's expression was one of shock. "Nyetian, that guy is so scary." "Who is he?" "I don't know him," Nyetian said, shaking his head. He didn't mention Yi Qinghai's name. He killed dozens of four-eyed berserk apes with a single palm strike. He's definitely a peak paramount god. Jian Jingyun was also shocked. He frowned and said, "He doesn't know us. Why would he help us?" Nyetian took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Let's not worry about him for now. Let's enter the city first." With that, Nyetian's figure flickered, and he took a step forward. Staring at Liang Shun and the others, he said in a cold voice, "Are you still not going to open the city gates?" Liang Shun and the others were dumbfounded. It took them a while to react. Open. We'll open the gates immediately." One of the guards was drenched in cold sweat. He nodded repeatedly, turned around, and pulled the switch on the city gate. The heavy gate slowly opened, and a passage appeared above the city's grand spell formation. The sudden appearance of the black-robed cultivator shocked all the guards. Now that they reacted, how could they dare to stop Nietian and the others from entering the city? Liang Shun stood there in a daze. The horn of carnage in his hand trembled twice, but he still managed to muster the courage. He was afraid that if he blew the horn of carnage, it would attract the black-robed cultivator. Nietian took a step forward and entered the passage, landing on the city wall. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wushan followed closely behind Nietian and also arrived on the city wall. Nietian wasn't in a hurry to enter the city. His eyes were fixed on Liang Shun, and he walked forward step by step. With every step he took, the killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. You, what do you want? Liang Shun could feel Nietian's killing intent. His teeth were chattering, and he couldn't speak properly. His forehead was drenched in cold sweat, and his face was as pale as paper. What do you think? Niet Tianling smiled coldly, and his eyes were cold and austere. Nietian wasn't a bloodthirsty person, but he wasn't a pushover either. Chapter 1821. Nietian took a step forward, the killing intent in his eyes sharp to the extreme. But just at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Stop! A low voice suddenly rang out, following which a figure landed on the city wall like a specter, descending from the sky. Nietian couldn't help frowning when he heard the voice behind him. Turning around, he saw a black-clothed man standing there like a ghost. His figure was thin and shriveled, and his aged face was like a skeleton. Nietian's eyes narrowed, astonishment on his face. He hadn't sensed this person's existence just now. Hai said someone came just now. Could it be this person? Nietian thought to himself, his heart sinking. Yi Qinghai had left in a hurry just now, obviously to avoid someone. Nietian guessed that the person Yi Qinghai was avoiding was the person in front of him. The reason Yi Qinghai avoided this person wasn't because he was afraid, but because he was worried that the other party would recognize him. The black-clothed man's arrival immediately caused the atmosphere to become oppressive. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him, but no one knew who he was. Even Liang Shun and the other Slaughter City guards didn't know who this black-clothed man was. Who are you? Nietian forced himself to calm down, staring at the black-clothed man without the slightest fear. Yi Qinghai had long since known that this person would come, so he had directly left. Therefore, it was impossible for this person to kill Nietian. Otherwise, Yi Qinghai absolutely wouldn't have left. The black-clothed man glared venomously at Nietian, his complexion extremely unsightly as he inwardly said, "Old Nine died at this brat's hands." The Old Nine he spoke of was none other than the Nine Lotus Lord who had just died at Nietian's hands, and his identity was the head of the 12 Lotus Lords. Nietian had killed the 9 Lotus Lord, so the head of the Lotus Lord's hatred towards Nietian could be imagined. He wished that he could flay Nietian's skin, pull out his tendons, and dismember his corpse into 10,000 pieces. However, he didn't dare to do so, because the Black Lotus King had given the order that Nietian couldn't die, and Nietian had to participate in the path of slaughter. The Lotus Head could not understand. First, the Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nietian. Then, after Nietian killed the 9 Lotus Lord, the Black Lotus King actually did not want Nietian to die. This was too strange. Although he felt strange, he did not dare to disobey the Black Lotus King's order. Therefore, the Lotus Head did not appear here to kill Nietian, but to confirm that the latter was still alive. You don't need to know my identity. Hand over the Black Lotus, and you can enter the city, the Lotus Head said coldly. Its voice wasn't loud, but contained a domineering aura that couldn't be defied. Nietian frowned slightly, and his face turned gloomy. This person first stopped him from killing Liang Shun, then tried to take away the Black Lotus from him. He was truly arrogant and overbearing. At the same time, Nietian sensed that the Lotus Head was intending to kill him. However, it was suppressing its killing intent, as if it was afraid of making a move. The Lotus Head's attitude was very strange, and it puzzled Nyetian. If I wanted to enter the city, I would have done so long ago. Nyetian smiled faintly. He stared at the lotus head with a playful look and said, "Before I enter the city, I have something to do. You still want to kill him?" The lotus head suddenly froze, and a trace of surprise appeared on its face. It then fixed its gaze on Liang Shun. The lotus head was very surprised by Nyetian's performance. No greater god had ever been able to remain so calm in front of him. Nyetian's strong temperament had exceeded the lotus head's expectations. What the lotus head didn't know was that Nyetian had already noticed that the lotus head didn't dare to do anything to him. That was why he was so insistent. Yes. Nyetian nodded and stared coldly at Liang Shun. He said in a deep voice, "This person has tried to kill me time and again. How can I let him live?" Liang Shun sensed the killing intent from Nyetian. He then looked at the lotus head and knelt down. He begged, "Your Excellency, I know I was wrong. Please save my life." Liang Shun was smart. Although he didn't know who the lotus head was, he could tell that it was definitely a big shot. As long as the lotus head was willing, it could definitely save his life. Useless. The lotus head suddenly turned to look at Liang Shun. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in its eyes, and then a powerful aura enveloped Liang Shun. Bang! There was a muffled sound in the air. Before Liang Shun could react, he exploded into a pool of blood and died on the spot. This! Everyone gasped in astonishment as they stared at the head of the lotus in astonishment. No one had thought that the lotus head would kill Liang Shun directly. Nyetian was also stunned. He couldn't help but furrow his brows. Actually, he was just testing the lotus head. It didn't matter to him whether he killed Liang Shun or not. He just wanted to see the lotus head's reaction. The lotus head killing Liang Shun was out of Nyetian's expectation. Also, the lotus head had called Liang Shun useless. It was as if it was blaming Liang Shun for not being able to kill Nyetian. "I have already killed the person you wanted to kill. Now, hand over the black lotus." The lotus head stared at Nyetian and said coldly. The Black Lotus King had given the order. Therefore, the lotus head wouldn't kill Nyetian. However, it must get the black lotus back. Nyetian frowned. This was the first time he met the lotus head. How did the latter know that he had the black lotus? Since the lotus head wanted to get the black lotus back, it undoubtedly meant that it was one of the 12 lotus masters. Nyetian sensed the lotus head's aura. It was much stronger than the previous lotus master. It was obvious that it was a more terrifying character. "I do have the black lotus." Nyetian became cold. He smiled and said, "I can hand the black lotus to you. However, I want to know, what is your relationship with the lotus master who killed me?" The lotus head's eyes suddenly narrowed. The murderous intent in its eyes intensified. However, it disappeared in a flash. It then calmed down and said, "I will say it again. Hand over the black lotus." The corners of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He had no intention of handing over the black lotus. Instead, he smiled coldly and said, "Do you know? The lotus master died a horrible death. I used the power of the runes to shatter all the meridians in his body. I also devoured his consciousness bit by bit. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. After telling me some things, he self-destructed." "Shut up." As soon as Nyetian finished speaking, the lotus head's expression suddenly changed. It roared. "Ninth brother would never tell you anything." "Ninth brother?" Nyetian's eyes flickered. A strange light flashed in them. He said, "So, the lotus master was the 9th lotus master. It seems that you're also one of the 12 lotus masters. Judging from your strength, you should be the leader of the 12 lotus masters, right?" The lotus head was stunned. It immediately realized that it had been tricked by Nyetian. The reason why Nyetian had said those words just now was to infuriate him and force him to tell him something. The lotus head had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. It had weathered countless storms and seen countless people. It never expected that it would be tricked by a little kid today. Chapter 1822. Boom! The lotus head flew into a rage and instantly lost control. A violent aura pressed down on Nyetian, and an unparalleled force enveloped him. Nietian immediately felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. Nietian's body sank slightly. His body was almost bent by the terrifying aura. His eyes were bloodshot and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He had not expected the lotus head to be so impulsive and actually attack him. He had not used the 3 forbidden techniques and was only a mid-high god. It was rather difficult for him to forcefully resist the aura of a late paramount god. Nietian. This sudden scene caused Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan to cry out in shock at the same time. Both of their faces turned aghast. Their cries were like thunder in the lotus head's ears. The latter's eyes narrowed before he calmed down and immediately dispersed his aura. The pressure around Nietian immediately disappeared. He took a few steps back and trembled. He vomited a mouthful of blood, and his face immediately became much better. Nietian stabilized his body and looked up at the lotus head. There was no fear in his eyes at all. Instead, there was a playful expression. The lotus head's expression flickered as it looked at Nietian, and a hint of apprehension could even be sensed in its eyes. It had been too impulsive earlier. It had actually lost control of its emotions. The lotus head was shocked. It had faced countless opponents in the past. There were even some that were stronger than it, but it had been able to deal with them easily. Why would it be angered by a few words from Nietian? What astonished him even more was that Nietian had actually withstood the pressure he had unleashed with all his might just now. With its strength, even a late overgod would not be able to withstand its pressure. Liang Shun was an example of that. Nietian was only a mid-high god. How could his martial body be so powerful? All of this had far exceeded the lotus head's expectations. However, it was fortunate that Nietian's martial body was powerful. If he had really died, the lotus head would be in great trouble. In the Black Lotus domain, the Black Lotus King was a supreme existence. Disobeying the orders of the Black Lotus King would only result in a single outcome: death. If Nietian had died just now, the lotus head would not have survived either. Looks like my guess was right. You are indeed the leader of the 12 Lotus Lords. Nietian wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. His complexion had completely returned to normal. He smiled faintly, a playful and provocative look in his eyes. Needless to say, Nietian was indeed very impressive. With just a few simple words, he was able to find out the identity of the lotus head. Everyone else was stunned. Who would have thought that Nietian could remain so calm in the face of someone far stronger than him? The lotus head was suppressing a ball of anger in his heart that he couldn't swallow or spit out. It was extremely uncomfortable. With a gloomy expression, he said in a deep voice, "Brat, are you really not afraid of death? Aren't you afraid that I will kill you?" Nietian faintly smiled as he stared at the two of them. With a provocative expression, he said, "Do you dare? You?" The lotus head was stunned. His face suddenly changed. He felt as if his blood was flowing in reverse, and his entire body was about to explode. Nietian's intelligence had exceeded his expectations. He could actually tell that the lotus head did not dare to kill him. It was precisely because he was sure of this that Nietian dared to be so arrogant. "I'm guessing that someone must have told me that you can't kill me now, so you don't dare to do it." Nietian faintly smiled and said, "I killed the Lord of the Lotus Lord. You were very close to him, right? I'm standing right in front of you, but you can't avenge the Lord of the Lotus Lord. That must be a very uncomfortable feeling, right? You little brat, you're like puff." The lotus head stared at Nietian with a fiery gaze. His teeth were chattering, and he was so angry that his blood was boiling. In the end, he was so angry that he vomited blood. Nietian was too arrogant, too insolent, too hateful. The lotus head stared at Nietian viciously, but he didn't dare to do anything. The Black Lotus King's words were still ringing in his ears, and he couldn't disobey. At this moment, everyone was stunned, and their faces were stiff and filled with shock. A dignified late-stage paramount god was actually so angry that he vomited blood because of a few words from Nietian. This was too miraculous. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan were watching from the side, baffled. Only now did they realize that Nye Tian was not only strong in battle, but also a monstrous talker. Nye Tian looked at the lotus head, but he didn't intend to stop there. He smiled and said, "If I'm not mistaken, the person who ordered you not to kill me was the Black Lotus King, right?" The Black Lotus King's pupils shrank when he heard Nye Tian's name. His body trembled, and he vomited another mouthful of blood. He never imagined that Nye Tian would be able to guess the Black Lotus King's identity. Nye Tian couldn't help but smile when he saw the Lotus Head's reaction. "It seems I guessed it right again." But then, Nye Tian's face sank, and his eyes turned somber. He stared at the Lotus Head and said, "Why does the Black Lotus King want to kill me?" The Lotus Head's face changed again, and he involuntarily took several steps back, as if he was a little afraid of Nye Tian. Nye Tian was too shrewd, and his thoughts were like needles. The Lotus Head's eyes trembled, and he didn't dare to speak again. "You don't want to say it?" The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. "Then I'll tell you. The Black Lotus King wants to kill me because I have the fiend god nascent embryo." The Lotus Head's face stiffened, and his whole body stiffened. He subconsciously swallowed, and his eyes trembled violently. The fiend god nascent embryo. The Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nye Tian because Nye Tian had the fiend god nascent embryo. Right now, Nye Tian's expression was very complicated. Judging from the Lotus Head's reaction, the Black Lotus King wanted to kill him because of the fiend god nascent embryo. But Nye Tian couldn't understand why the Black Lotus King knew about the fiend god nascent embryo. There were very few people who knew the secret of Nye Tian's fiend god nascent embryo. Other than the people of the Holy Parliament, there were also Lian Jiufeng and the others. However, these people didn't seem to have anything to do with the Black Lotus King. What was even stranger was that the 9 Lotus King appeared as soon as Nye Tian and the others entered the Dark Mountain Range. He seemed to be waiting for them there. Nye Tian guessed that the Black Lotus King might have a special method to sense the fiend god nascent embryo. There was also something else that was very strange. The Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nye Tian first, but now he changed his mind. It was very strange. Nye Tian couldn't understand a single one of these questions. Judging from the Lotus Head's shocked reaction, he didn't know anything either. Nye Tian thought for a moment. There was no point in continuing to argue with the Lotus Head. He flipped his hand, and a black lotus appeared in his palm. He tossed it to the Lotus Head and said, "The black lotus you wanted, it's yours." The Lotus Head was stunned, its face full of confusion. It didn't think that Nye Tian would obediently hand over the black lotus. Of course, Nye Tian didn't want to hand over the black lotus, but he knew that the Lotus Head wouldn't let him go if he didn't hand over something after toying with it for so long. He didn't want to argue with the Lotus Head, so he handed it over. Nye Tian turned around and left, but he stopped after taking 2 steps. He said indifferently, "This is the Lotus Head. The Black Lotus King definitely doesn't want anyone else to know about the fiend god nascent embryo. I'll leave these guards for you to kill." After saying this, Nye Tian's figure flashed and he left. Chapter 1823. Nye Tian's group of 3 landed in the middle of the city. A moment later, pleading sounds came from behind them, followed by miserable screams. The head of the 12 Lotus Heads is just an idiot. Nye Tian turned his head back and saw that the Lotus Head had really finished off those guards. He couldn't help sneering inwardly. Everything was going according to his plan. Although the Lotus Head hadn't said anything, Nye Tian was able to confirm many things from him. But at this time, there were more and more riddles lingering in Nye Tian's heart. He couldn't figure it out, so he could only give up for now. To him, the most important matter right now was the slaughter path. Yi Qinghai definitely had his reasons for making him the Slaughter King. Nye Tian wouldn't disappoint Yi Qinghai. Is this Slaughter City? It's no different from the outside. Gue Wuzan couldn't help frowning as he looked around as Nye Tian's group of 3 walked on the main street. Nye Tian also noticed this point and felt it was a little strange. From the outside, Slaughter City looked extremely gloomy and gloomy. But upon entering, they discovered that this place was no different from the outside cities. The streets were filled with people, and there were restaurants and all kinds of shops along the way. Moreover, Nyetian also discovered that there were no blood fiend ruins in Slaughter City. For what he could see, there was no difference between Slaughter City and the outside cities. If he had to find a difference, it would be that the martial artists here all had sinister expressions, and the hostility between them was very thick. Nyetian was a little curious. Just where did these people of Slaughter City come from? He could sense that there were quite a few people in the crowd like them who had the slaughter writ on them, but the majority of them were normal people. Perhaps Slaughter City is an ancient city, and the residents here used to live here, guessed Nyetian, not taking it to heart. Nyetian, where are we going now? Gue Wukan was slightly excited as he asked, muttering to himself, I wonder if teacher will be here. Let's take a look around first and wait for the Path of Massacre to open. Nyetian faintly smiled. He naturally hadn't forgotten that the most important matter in coming to Slaughter City this time was to find the ghost Marshal Wild Sand. However, it was not easy to find a person without any clues. Nyetian didn't have a good idea either. He could only take it one step at a time. As for how to start the Path of Massacre, Nyetian wasn't in a hurry. In any case, he had the kill order in his hands, so the people of Black Lotus would take the initiative to find him. Nyetian followed the crowd and walked forward. At this moment, he felt something. He suddenly turned around and saw two black-clothed martial artists walking towards them. Come with us, the two black-clad cultivators said coldly as they arrived before Nyetian and the others. Then they walked forward. The corner of Nyetian's mouth curled into a faint smile. These two people were clearly from the Black Lotus sect. Nyetian nodded towards Jian Jingyun and Gue Wutsan and followed the two black-clothed men. A while later, Nyetian and the others arrive in a remote area under the lead of the two black-clothed martial artists. A huge square appeared before them. Many people had gathered in the square. Something seemed to have happened. Nyetian looked over. There were two huge stone pillars erected in the square. They were several 100 meters tall, and a person stood on each pillar. The two of them were facing each other. They were actually fighting. They're fighting. Nyetian frowned. He then discovered that there were many black-clothed martial artists standing guard outside the square. These people were not weak. Most of them were peak overgods. At the same time, Nyetian discovered that all the people in the square possessed the kill order. With a rough estimate, there were several tens of thousands of people. Nyetian had never thought that there would be so many people with the kill order. In the air above the square, there was an azure-robed old man watching the battle. Nyetian's eyes locked onto the azure-robed old man. He sent out his divine sense and couldn't help but tremble. The old man was actually a late overgod. He immediately understood that the azure-robed old man was the judge of the battle. What are they doing? Nyetian frowned. He didn't understand. However, the two black-clothed martial artists beside him didn't say anything. They just watched the battle in the air. Nyetian frowned, but he wasn't in a hurry. He just watched the battle in front of him quietly. The two martial artists were both late overgods. They weren't weak. Their auras surged and filled the air. Even space seemed to tighten. At this moment, the two martial artists moved. They attacked at the same time. Two huge palms collided. The void trembled slightly, and there was a huge explosion. Terrifying energy filled the air. Bang! Immediately after, a muffled sound rang out as a silhouette was sent flying backwards. The silhouette paused in midair, as though it had collided with something. Next, the air trembled as a strange power gushed forth, directly smashing that cultivator's body into smithereens. The air was drenched in blood. Gasp! The crowd gasped when they saw this. They had no idea what was going on. Nyetian frowned. He activated the holographic divine glyph and sent out his divine sense. He immediately discovered something fishy. There was a terrifying kill order in the square. The cultivator who was sent flying just now had touched the killing array and triggered the activation of the killing array, causing him to die a miserable death. This is the slaughterhouse. At this time, the black-clothed man next to Nyetian spoke up. The winner of the slaughterhouse lives, and the loser dies. The slaughterhouse? Nyetian frowned, and his expression darkened. After the slaughtering hand entered the slaughtering arena, there were only two outcomes, victory or death. After calming down, Niet Tion asked in a deep voice, "What's the use of the killing fields? There must be a reason why the slaughterhouse entered the slaughterhouse and fought to the death. It's used to determine the qualifications and strength of the slaughterhouse." The black-clothed man said, "The slaughterhouse, only those who win 3 battles in a row in the slaughterhouse are qualified to enter the path of massacres." Niet Tion's eyes narrowed. So, even with the slaughterhouse, he still couldn't enter the path of massacres. He had to win 3 battles in a row in the slaughterhouse. Does that mean that after I win 3 battles in a row, I can directly enter the path of massacres? Niet Tion glanced at the black-clothed man and asked again. Yes. The black-clothed man nodded and said, "The path of massacres is open at any time. As long as you have the strength, you can directly enter. And the earlier you enter, the more advantages you have. But let me give you a piece of advice. Don't enter the slaughterhouse so casually. Observe for a few days first." Many people, the first time they came to the slaughterhouse, they immediately started fighting. They wanted to enter the path of massacres earlier, but the majority of them ended up dying in the slaughterhouse. The corner of Niet Tion's mouth twitched. He finally understood now. The so-called slaughterhouse was actually an elimination round before entering the path of massacres. But this elimination round was very cruel. Most people would die in the slaughterhouse and have no chance to enter the path of massacres. What if I don't participate in the slaughterhouse? At this time, Niet Tion's eyes flickered and he asked. Chapter 1824. Niet Tion looked at the black-clothed man before him and frowned slightly. The people of Black Lotus really did have some tricks up their sleeves. They were extremely insidious. Hands of slaughter like Niet Tion would be directly taken to the field of slaughter as soon as they arrived in Slaughter City. They had 5 days to either die in the field of slaughter or emerge victorious in the field of slaughter and gain the right to enter the path of slaughter. If they did nothing in the 5 days, the people of Black Lotus would personally take action, and they would still die. Upon hearing the words of the black-clothed man, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan sucked in a mouthful of cold air. From the looks of it, from the moment they had entered Slaughter City, they had stepped onto a path of no return and could only walk on it till the end. Watch carefully. The black-clothed man glanced past Niet Tion coldly before turning around and leaving in search of other hands of slaughter. Niet Tion became cold and smiled faintly. There were still 5 days, so he was in no hurry. It was not a bad idea to watch the others fight first. At this moment, another person entered the field of slaughter to challenge the person who had just won. The challenger was also a late overgod. The two of them clashed several times before one of them was slammed into the killing formations around the field of slaughter by a palm strike from the other. He died on the spot. Afterwards, Niet Tion watched for quite a while and discovered that most of the cultivators were overgods. Late overgods were already very powerful, and there were very few peak overgods. There were even fewer overgods. Niet Tion, let's go. Gue Wuchan said softly as he grew rather impatient. There's no hurry. Let's wait a little longer. Niet Tion waved his hand slightly and glanced around. He pointed at a few people and said, "Those guys are all over gods. They haven't gone up yet." Niet Tion had already secretly sensed all the tens of thousands of hands of slaughter when he was watching the battle earlier. Of the tens of thousands of warriors present, there were less than 10 who were early paramount gods, and one of them was a mid-paramount god. That made him the strongest of the group. Niet Tion was a little worried that these paramount god martial artists hadn't made a move yet. As long as he didn't run into the mid-paramount god, he was completely confident in his chances. However, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan were slightly weaker. If they were to encounter a supreme god, it would be a little dangerous. The killing arena was a battle of life and death. There was no such thing as admitting defeat. Defeat meant death. Therefore, Niet Tion had to be cautious. There's still one more. Hurry up and die. At this moment, the victorious cultivator on the stone pillar in the middle of the slaughtering ground laughed arrogantly. His face was filled with provocation as he shouted. This person was a late overgod. He had already won 2 battles, so he only needed one more to gain the right to enter the path of slaughter. A mere ant dares to be so arrogant? Before that person finished speaking, a deep voice rang out. A figure flew through the air and stepped onto another stone pillar. Rumble! When the silhouette of that person landed, the huge stone pillar shook violently, sinking several meters into the ground. The entire killing field shook violently because of this, and after that, a sharp aura spread out, surging throughout the entire killing field. What a powerful aura! Everyone could feel the cold aura rushing towards them. Their eyes were filled with fear. This person's aura was extremely powerful. It was on a completely different level compared to the other slaughtering hands. It was simply too much stronger. It's him. Yet Tian frowned slightly. The person who had appeared in the slaughtering ground was the mid-over god he had been paying attention to. He's... Almost at the same time, Jian Jingyun suddenly cried out. He couldn't finish his sentence. Nie Tian and Gue Wuchan were stunned at the same time. They looked at Jian Jingyun and said, "You know him?" Jian Jingyun's face was filled with astonishment. He had never thought that he would meet this person here. After a few seconds, Jian Jingyun's expression calmed down. He took a deep breath and said, "His name is Nangong Ju. He's from the Nangong family." The Nangong family? Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He immediately thought of someone. The vice-chairman of the Holy Assembly, Nangong Duxiu. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He asked, "What's the relationship between this person and Nangong Duxiu?" Jian Jingyun looked at Nie Tian and was stunned. He didn't think that Nie Tian would know Nangong Duxiu and even call her by name. There was even a trace of anger in his eyes. Nangong Duxiu was the vice-chairman of the Holy Assembly. He was a peak over god. In the 9 major realms, he was definitely one of the top 10 experts. His status was even higher than the patriarchs of the 9 major clans. But Nie Tian didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Nangong Duxiu. In fact, he even felt some resentment towards him. This surprised Jian Jingyun a little. How could Jian Jingyun have known that Nie Tian not only knew of Nangong Duxiu, but that he had even fought with him? Back in the god-shepherding domain, the Holy Assembly had threatened Nie Tian and threatened to kill Mo Rushi and the child in her womb. That had put Nie Tian in a situation where he was certain to die. If the inescapable net hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The enmity between Nie Tian and Nangong Duxiu was irreconcilable. How could he show respect to her? Jian Jingyun was curious, but he didn't ask too many questions. He said, "Nangong Ju is a genius of the Nangong family's new generation. He's the son of the Nangong clan's patriarch, Nangong Duo. Nangong Duxiu is his second uncle, a genius of the new generation." After knowing Nangong Ju's identity, Nie Tian couldn't help but sneer as he stared at the latter with a dark gaze. Nie Tian guessed that Nangong Ju was around 50,000 years old. For him to reach the mid-paramount god level at such a young age was indeed terrifying. However, Nangong Ju's talent in the martial path was much weaker than Nie Tian's 6th uncle, Nie Feiyu. Nie Feiyu was only a few thousand years old, but he was already the strongest over god. When Nie Tian first met Nie Feiyu, the latter had already shown signs of advancing to the paramount god level. Nie Tian reckoned that he was already an early paramount god. If Nie Feiyu was given tens of thousands of years, he might not be able to reach the peak of the paramount god level, but he could easily reach the late paramount god level. Nangong Ju's age should be around the same as Nie Tian's father, Nie Fenghua. However, his strength was far inferior to Nie Fenghua. Regardless, Nangong Ju was still a genius. His strength could not be underestimated. At the very least, Nie Tian was currently weaker than him. Yes. Jian Jingyun nodded his head slightly. He had a shocked expression on his face as he said, "I didn't expect Nangong Ju to come here. I've long heard that Nangong Ju is a cold and arrogant person who looks down on everyone. It seems like it's true." At that moment, the green-clothed old man in the sky looked at Nangong Ju, and his face couldn't help but change. He thought to himself, "This person's strength is so strong. Looks like the king of massacre in this path of massacre will definitely be this person In the slaughterhouse, the martial artist who was fighting against Nangong Ju had a face as pale as paper. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Nangong Ju was too strong. There was no way this martial artist could contend against him. The martial artist's intestines were green with regret. A moment of insolence had caused him to provoke such a powerful person. Diant. At this moment, Nangong Ju's expression turned cold. His body swayed slightly, and a sharp aura whizzed out towards the martial artist. Chapter 1825. Seeing the scene in the killing field, the onlookers all took in a deep breath, and their eyes trembled uncontrollably. Not only was Nangong Ju powerful, he was also ruthless. He did not give his opponent any chance at all. Tian stared at Nangong Ju, and his face darkened slightly. Nangong Ju's eyes were extremely cold, as if he did not kill a human, but an ant. Without a doubt, not only was Nangong Ju arrogant, but he was also ruthless and bloodthirsty. After killing his opponent, Nangong Ju glanced across the crowd coldly. He said coldly, "Who else wants to die?" His arrogant voice resounded across the entire place. The entire killing field was dead silent. No one dared to speak. Whoever dared to go up now was seeking death. Nangong Ju's strength suppressed everyone. A bunch of ants. You don't even have the courage to go up? Nangong Ju spoke again. He glanced across the crowd coldly. He was extremely arrogant. The crowd fell into an even deeper silence. The atmosphere was suffocating. "Sir, since no one dares to challenge you, you can go up now." At this moment, the old man in the sky spoke. "Although you did not win 3 rounds, your strength is beyond doubt. You have the right to enter the path of slaughter." The old man's words were very clear. He wanted Nangong Ju to enter the path of slaughter. Nangong Ju raised his head and glanced at the old man. However, his lips curled into a cold smile. Then his silhouette flickered and he leaped into the air. His cold gaze glanced around, and he spoke in a low voice. "How can the rules of the slaughterhouse be changed so easily? Since nobody dares to step up, then I will personally choose my opponent." As soon as Nangong Ju finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. Many people paled in fright. The old man was stunned. He never thought that Nangong Ju would be so ruthless. He wanted to kill 3 people no matter what. At this moment, Nangong Ju's eyes locked onto an overgod. Then he suddenly moved and slapped down with his palm. A sharp force whistled out and struck the ground. Everyone felt the violent force, and they all dodged. However, there were still many people who could not dodge it in time. Boom! The violent palm shadow fell, and the ground shook. Dozens of martial artists died on the spot. Everyone was stunned by the sudden turn of events, and their expressions turned into one of terror. Nangong Ju was too ruthless. He viewed human lives as grass and killed whenever he wanted to. The green-clothed old man frowned, and his expression was obviously not too good. However, he still shook his head, looked at Nangong Ju, and said, "Sir, you have already killed 3 people. Can you stop now?" The corner of Nangong Ju's mouth twitched. He coldly laughed and said, "Of course not. I only wanted to kill 1 person with that palm strike just now. The others are merely cannon fodder that lies down and dies." The green-clothed elderly's face darkened. He didn't expect that Nangong Ju would still not stop. Nangong Ju didn't care about the elder's reaction at all. His gaze was heavy as he scanned the entire place. After which, his gaze locked onto 1 person. The corner of his mouth slightly moved as he mumbled, "You must be from the Jian clan. The next person to die will be you." The eyes of the person who was stared at by Nangong Ju trembled, and his expression changed. He cried out in shock, "Nangong Ju recognized me." The person who was locked onto by Nangong Ju was none other than Jian Jingyun. Jian Jingyun knew Nangong Ju, and the latter also had some impression of him. Nangong Ju actually wanted to kill Jian Jingyun. Tian suddenly froze. He felt that something was wrong. He immediately looked at Jian Jingyun and said in a deep voice, "Calm down." Hearing Tian's voice, Jian Jingyun's frightened expression darkened. His gaze became much more determined. Anti! Nangongju roared and once again slammed his palm down. The surging palm shadows were like thunder from the ninth heaven and fiercely pressed towards Jian Jingyun's location. Boom! In an instant, a loud explosion sounded in the sky. The space trembled as if it was going to collapse. Jian Jingyun, Gue Wuchan, let's attack together. Nietian looked at the mountain-like palm shadows in the sky and roared. After which, frightening black symbols surged from his body, and the aura around his body continued to increase. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan looked at each other, after which their gazes became firm and the aura around their bodies surged. At this moment, the green-robed old man looked at Nietian and the other two and couldn't help but be shocked. He thought to himself, what are they trying to do? Could it be that they want to take an attack from a mid-stage paramount god? From the green-robed old man's point of view, what Nietian and the other two were doing was no different from seeking death. Two peak over gods and a mid-stage high god. Trying to take an attack from a mid-stage paramount god was simply courting death. Were those black symbols on that kid's body? But in the next moment, the green-robed old man sensed something and frowned slightly. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, three sword shadows soared into the sky. A violent sword aura blossomed in the sky. The sword light shot out for tens of thousands of meters, and the sword intent filled the space within 10,000 meters. The three sword shadows, like three giant dragons, rose against the wind, the sword intent surging. When the others saw this scene, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect Nietian and the other two to be so strong. You want to fight against me with this level of strength? Ridiculous. Nangongju sneered in the sky. He didn't care about the attack from Nietian and the other two at all. But at this moment, a strange scene happened. The three sword shadows in the air suddenly exploded and fused together, forming a gigantic sword shadow that was 10,000 meters long. Instantly, a terrifying sword intent permeated the air. The sharpness of the sword intent seemed to be able to tear apart the heavens and earth. Boom! In the air, the shadow of the palm and the shadow of the sword finally collided. A thunderous sound rang out, resounding throughout the space. Instantly, billowing waves of energy spread out in all directions, wreaking havoc in the air. Chi-chi-chi. Crack. Ear-piercing sounds rang out continuously. Then there was a loud sound. The crowd saw that the palm shadow couldn't withstand the power of the sword shadow, and a crack appeared on it. Then the palm shadow shattered. Boom! The sword shadow broke through everything. Like a rainbow, it headed straight for Nangongju. Nangongju was surprised. Then a long black spear appeared in his hand, and he stabbed forward. The spear's shadow was like a dragon, and it shattered the sword shadow in front of him. Once again, the scene fell into dead silence. Everyone's gaze moved between Nangongju and Nietian. Their faces were filled with shock, and they couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Nietian and the other two joined forces, and not only did they block Nangongju's attack, they even almost injured him. This was too terrifying. It exceeded everyone's imagination. At this moment, the elder in green was also stunned. His face tightened, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. He originally thought that Nietian and the other two would definitely die. But the result was that Nietian and the other two fought against Nangongju and even had a slight advantage. Nietian and the other two were all swordsmen. Plus, they had fought together before, and they had great chemistry with each other. After fusing their sword intent, the power of their sword intent far exceeded their individual strength. That was why they could fight against Nangongju head-on. One has to say that Nangongju was too careless. He didn't use his full strength in the attack just now. Chapter 1826. Nangongju stood in midair. His eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent as he stared at Nietian and the others. He didn't expect that the three ants he looked down upon would actually be able to withstand his palm strike, and even almost injure him. This was a humiliation to him. A huge humiliation. He couldn't accept such a thing. He had to kill Nietian and the others in order to dispel the hatred in his heart. Nietian looked at Nangong Ju in midair, and his eyes narrowed. His face instantly became gloomy and terrifying. Nangong Ju was a vicious, merciless, and bloodthirsty person. He was a troublesome fellow. Just now, if it wasn't for Nietian and the others working together, they wouldn't have been able to block his palm. Furthermore, Nietian knew that Nangong Ju didn't use his full strength in that palm. Otherwise, the three of them wouldn't have been able to block it. In terms of battle prowess, Nietian and the others could fight against an early-stage paramount god. However, Nangong Ju was too strong. He had the strength of a mid-stage paramount god and had the battle prowess of a late-stage paramount god. Nietian estimated that Nangong Ju's battle prowess wasn't much weaker than Jing Chen's. However, Nangong Ju didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. It seemed like he was going to attack again and kill Nietian and the others. What is he doing? Is he going to attack again? The crowd's eyes focused on Nangong Ju, and their eyes trembled violently. Even though they were bloodthirsty people, they still felt a chill down their spine when they met a homicidal maniac like Nangong Ju. 3 ants die for me. Right at this moment, Nangong Ju's cold eyes trembled and revealed a bloodthirsty, killing intent. A vicious voice came out from his throat, and the spear in his hand stabbed out. The spear was like a dragon, and its aura was majestic. The void instantly sank as if it was going to collapse. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying spear shadow whizzed out like a huge dragon. It swept up the dark clouds in all directions and pressed down on Nietian and the others. Nietian, Jian Jingyun, and Gue Wukan were startled at the same time as their faces changed. Nangong Ju's spear strike was extremely powerful and heavy. It was enough to destroy an entire mountain range. It had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. With the strength of Nietian and company, it would be very difficult for them to block this spear. Nietian did not expect that other than having tyrannical strength. Nangong Ju was actually a spear user who had reached the realm of spear oblivion. It seemed like he was faintly showing signs of breaking through the realm of spear and martial as one. Among martial artists, swordsmen and saber users were very common, but spear users were very rare. Compared to the sharpness of the sword and the tyranny of the saber, the spear was both fierce and tyrannical. Therefore, under the same realm, a spear user was definitely not weaker than a swordsman or a saber user. It's over. These 3 brats are going to die. When the crowd saw the scene in the sky, they could feel the vastness of the spear shadows. Their eyes flickered as they exclaimed in their hearts. At this very moment, no one believed that Nietian and the other 2 could block Nangong Ju's spear. That azure-clothed old man watched by the side. His eyes flickered nonstop as if he was considering whether to make a move or not. Nangong Ju's current actions already violated the rules of the slaughter ground. But the azure-clothed old man knew that Nangong Ju's strength was formidable, so he did not plan on making a move to stop it. Nietian looked at the vast spear shadows in the sky. His eyes flickered nonstop as his brain revolved rapidly. At this time, he could completely let Jing Chun or Di Shirtian take action. The 2's battle strength was above Nangong Ju's. Any one of them taking action, not to mention instantly killing Nangong Ju, they could at least save Nietian and the others and heavily injure Nangong Ju at the same time. But Nietian did not want Jing Chun and Di Shirtian to come out. This place was not the obscure mountain range, but Slaughter City. This place was the Black Lotus Lair. If Nietian took out the 9 Extreme, it would definitely be discovered by the azure-clothed old man. In this way, it would definitely attract a large number of experts from the Black Lotus to come. At that time, not only would Jing Chun and Di Shirtian be in danger, even the 9 Extreme would not be safe. The Black Lotus's foundation was very strong. The Black Lotus King, the 12 Lotus Lords, these experts all had battle strength comparable to Di Shirtian. If they appeared at the same time, Di Shirtian and Jing Chun would not be able to block them. The 9 Extreme could not be exposed. Di Shirtian and Jing Chun could not be exposed either. After confirming this point, Niet Tian's expression sank, and his eyes instantly became firm. Jian Jingyun, Gue Wukon, cooperate with me. In the next instant, Niet Tian let out a low roar, and the black runes on his body surged crazily. An even more berserk sword intent was released, and at the same time, an extremely ferocious blood qi burst out. Seeing this, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukon immediately understood. Niet Tian wanted to ignite his blood qi to resist Nangong Ju's attack. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukon did not hesitate. The sword intent and blood qi burst out of their bodies, and instantly, a berserk and bloodthirsty sword intent and blood qi burst out and fused with Niet Tian's blood qi and sword intent. At this moment, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukon felt their souls tremble at the same time. The instant their blood qi and Niet Tian's blood qi fused, both of them felt the powerful energy contained in Niet Tian's blood qi. This was the first time Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukon had seen such a powerful bloodline power. Both of them had heard before that Niet Tian seemed to have the fiend god nascent embryo. However, both of them were young and did not know what the fiend god nascent embryo was. At this moment, they truly experienced the darkness, violence, vastness, and terror in Niet Tian's blood qi. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukon's blood qi and sword intent were almost directly devoured by Niet Tian's blood qi and sword intent. After Niet Tian absorbed their blood qi and sword intent, the aura around his body increased crazily. Immediately after, array runes appeared, and a terrifying power filled the space within 10,000 meters. High God Sword formation open. When Niet Tian felt that his blood qi and sword intent had fused to the extreme, he immediately let out a low roar. Immediately after, both of his feet stepped on the ground, and his figure soared into the sky. Starlight heaven suddenly pierced out. Endless array power gathered together, and a 10,000-meter long blood-colored sword image appeared and soared into the sky majestically. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukon were both very smart. Their figures and Niet Tian leaped up at the same time. The three of them formed a triangular formation, allowing the High God Sword formation to display its power to the maximum. Niet Tian, Jian Jingyun, and Gue Wukon. The three of them were very terrifying swordsmen. When the three of them fused their blood qi and sword intent and strengthened by the High God Sword formation, the power that they could erupt with was hard to estimate. Everyone, countless gazes, were stunned at this moment. They did not dare to believe the scene in front of them. Their expressions were sluggish and stiff, as if they had become stupid. The green-robed old man was also dumbfounded. His eyes trembled nonstop and the corner of his mouth twitched. However, he was unable to say anything. The strength of Niet Tian and the other two exceeded his expectations by too much, causing him to be shocked. When Nangong Ju saw that Niet Tian and the other two still dared to fight head-on, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. The corner of his mouth twitched with killing intent. Boom! Boom! In the void, the spear image and the sword image were like two huge dragons whistling in the sky. The heaven and earth became very small. In the next moment, the two frightening powers finally collided. Chapter 1827. Boom! A terrifying shock wave could be seen with the naked eye. It was like a surging wave, wreaking havoc in the void. A terrifying pressure was released, causing everyone to feel a tightness in their chests. Those who were weaker actually vomited blood on the spot. Their bodies trembled uncontrollably, and it was difficult for them to even stand. Rumble, ear-piercing sounds continuously rang out in the air. The two forces were too terrifying. Neither could destroy the other instantly. Instead, they were in a stalemate, devouring each other, clashing against each other, tearing each other apart, trying to destroy the other party. The two forces consumed each other. Shockwaves exploded one after another, slowly dissipating in the air. After a long time, the shockwaves in the void finally dimmed a little. Several figures appeared in the sky. It was Nangong Ju, Niet Tian, and the others. Nangongju's figure stood high up in the sky as he stared at Niet Tian and the others with an extremely ugly expression. Niet Tian, Jian Jingyun, and Gue Wushan stood in the sky. There were traces of blood at the corner of their mouths. Their faces were extremely pale, and their bodies were filled with a bloody aura that had yet to dissipate. In the clash, just now, Nangongju, Niet Tian, and Gue Wushan were evenly matched. The crowd raised their heads to look at the four people in the sky. They were shocked, and their eyes were trembling. At this moment, the people who were shocked were not Nangongju, but Niet Tian and the others. Nangongju was a middle-stage supreme god, so it was not strange for him to have such terrifying strength. However, Niet Tian and the others were different. Two of them were peak overgods, and the other one had a strange strength. On the surface, he seemed to be a middle-stage supreme god, but once he erupted, he could reach the strength of a late-stage supreme god. It was extremely strange. Everyone could tell that Niet Tian was the main force in that attack just now. It was hard to imagine that this ordinary-looking, silver-haired cultivator was actually so terrifying. On the other side of the sky, the green-clothed elder's expression was trembling. He thought in his heart, just who is that silver-haired cultivator? Why is his bloody aura so terrifying? The green-clothed elder could tell that the reason why Niet Tian and the others could block Nangongju's fatal attack was not only because of their sword intent and formation, but also because of their terrifying bloody aura. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan's blood qi was already very frightening, but Niet Tian's blood qi was even more frightening. The azure-robed old man had seen countless blood qi, but none of them were stronger than Niet Tian's. This youngster's strength should be at the mid-stage high god realm. He is relying on some kind of runes to increase his strength in an instant. His blood aura is very terrifying. He can directly devour the blood aura of other martial artists, said the green-clothed old man, after calming down a little. If it was said that Nangongju's appearance made the green-robed elder feel amazed, then Niet Tian's appearance made him feel terrified. Jian Jingyun, Gue Wuchan, are the two of you all right? In the air, Niet Tian exhaled a mouthful of impure air and asked in an indifferent tone. I'm fine. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan shook their heads at the same time. Then, they turned to look at Niet Tian. Only after confirming that the latter was all right did they feel relieved. In the previous attack, Niet Tian was at the forefront. Not only did he unleash the greatest power, but he also suffered the greatest impact. Luckily, his martial body was strong, and he was able to withstand the powerful impact. At this moment, Nangongju's eyes were staring at Niet Tian and the others. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with bloodlust. He had never expected that 3 mere ants would be able to block 2 of his attacks in a row. What was even stranger was that Nangongju actually felt a trace of fear towards Niet Tian. Niet Tian's current strength was still very weak. Once he grows up, he would definitely be a terrifying and undefeatable existence. At this moment, Nangongju was determined to kill Niet Tian and the others. Nangongju was not only strong, but he was also very cautious. Anyone who was a potential threat must be eliminated. Oh no, this guy still wants to attack. Feeling the killing intent from Nangongju's body, Niet Tian's eyes trembled and he cried out in his heart. To be able to withstand 2 of Nangongju's attacks was already the limit of Niet Tian and the others. If Nangongju didn't stop, it would be really dangerous. Niet Tian couldn't expose the 9 extremities, but Nangongju didn't want to stop, so he had to think of another way. Mister, are you going to continue to watch from the side? At this moment, Niet Tian suddenly turned around, looked at the old man in green, and asked coldly. Niet Tian had long since noticed that the cyan-robed old man was itching to make a move, as if he wanted to make a move, but he was still hesitating. He opened his mouth to force the green-robed old man to intervene. Are you blaming I? The old man's face stiffened. Then he took a step forward and replied coldly. I don't dare. Niet Tian sneered. Then, he looked at Nangongju with a dark gaze and said in a loud voice, The rules of the slaughterhouse are like iron. No one is allowed to break the rules. However, this person killed someone in front of so many people. He has directly challenged the slaughterhouse. In this situation, the people of the killing field didn't come out to stop it. I think the rules of the killing field are not like iron, but like scrap iron. As soon as he said that, it caused an uproar among the crowd. Nangong Ju relied on his strength and killed people casually, which angered the crowd. Although these people were bloodthirsty, they were also people with courage. Brat, you. Seeing the crowd's anger, the old man in green's face stiffened. He was extremely embarrassed as he stared at Nie Tian, speechless. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and said loudly, "Since the killing field set the rules, then they must be followed. Is there anything wrong with what I said just now?" Nangong Ju watched from the side. His face gradually darkened. Nie Tian was too cunning. He actually forced the killing field to interfere. Brat, Nangong Ju, will definitely kill you today. Nangong Ju took a step forward and his aura skyrocketed again. The killing intent around him became even denser. Nie Tian glanced past Nangong Ju, then looked at the old man in green. He said coldly, "Do you still want him to be so arrogant? Enough." The old man's face darkened, and he roared angrily. "This matter ends here. Whoever dares to do anything else is provoking the killing field." As soon as he said that, the surroundings of the killing field surged. Dozens of black-clothed figures began to move. Although these black-clothed cultivators were at the level of overgods, they represented the killing field and the Black Lotus. Nangong Ju was arrogant, but he was not stupid. He knew what kind of place this was. The killing field was not something he could offend. "Are you still not going to restrain yourself?" The old man in green looked at Nangong Ju coldly. He had already lost his patience. If Nangong Ju still wanted to be arrogant, he would be forcing him to fight. Nangong Ju's gaze was murderous. His eyes were filled with hatred and his teeth creaked. However, he still retracted his aura in the end. "Nangong Ju, you're not too stupid. You could be a coward at crucial times." Nie Tian looked at Nangong Ju and said provocatively, "Brat, the matter between us will not end until one of us dies." Nangong Ju's eyes were filled with killing intent. Nangong Ju's eyes were filled with killing intent. His face was so gloomy that it seemed as though blood would drip out of it. He said solemnly, "I will wait for you in the road of massacre. I want to see who else can help you after you enter the road of massacre." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He said no more, but he sneered inside. Chapter 1828. Nie Tian didn't put Nangong Ju in his eyes at all. What he was thinking about was how to make good use of Dishur Tian and Jing Chun, these two trump cards, after entering the path of slaughter, allowing him to smoothly become the king of slaughter. "Stinking brat, I'll be waiting for you." Nangong Ju laughed coldly. He didn't stay any longer and left. Nie Tian looked in the direction that Nangong Ju disappeared with a gloomy expression. The battle with Nangong Ju had made him realize the importance of his own strength. The current Nie Tian was still too weak. At his peak, he could only fight an early-stage paramount god. If he encountered a strong early-stage paramount god or a middle-stage paramount god, he wouldn't be able to fight at all. Although he had Sakura and Jing Chun by his side, sometimes they really couldn't come out. Nie Tian thought that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. As long as he could reach the Overgod realm and activate the 3 forbidden skills, his strength would reach the paramount god realm. At that time, he wouldn't be afraid of someone like Nangong Ju. "Brat, who are you?" At this moment, the green-robed elder suddenly looked at Nie Tian and asked, "Do I need to answer you?" Nie Tianling laughed coldly and asked back. The green-robed elder's face stiffened. He seemed like he was about to fly into a rage, but he held it in and said, "As far as I know, even the monstrous disciples of the 9 big clans are far from being able to compare to you. Are you from the 9 big clans or not? That's my business. I don't need to tell you." Nie Tianling replied coldly and ignored the green-robed elder. This green-robed elder was really interesting. He actually suspected that Nie Tian wasn't from the 9 big clans. In the world that Nie Tian knew, the 9 big clans were the limit. But Nie Tian knew that the 9 big clans were definitely not the limit. Fat Cat had said that sages existed and he knew how to reach the sage realm. Therefore, there must be a higher-level world above the 9 big clans. However, with Nietion's current strength, he still couldn't come into contact with those worlds. Nietion was very curious. There were plenty of peak paramount gods in the upper 3 realms, but none of them had ever reached the sage realm. Even a monstrous genius like Tion ultimately failed to break through to the sage realm and ended up as a remnant soul. It was only recently that his corporeal body was reconstructed and resurrected. What secrets were hidden in the saint realm? The current Nietion was thinking too far ahead. His strength was still too weak. At this moment, the green-clothed old man suddenly looked at Nietion and said in a cold voice, "Kid, it's your turn." Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't expect the green-robed old man to suddenly say that. The green-robed old man's eyes flickered as he looked at Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan. His eyes were cold and gloomy, and they were filled with dense killing intent. Nietion immediately realized that the green-robed old man was using Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan's lives as a threat to force him to step forward. Nietion's words just now had forced the green-robed old man to step forward. Obviously, the green-robed old man was holding a grudge against Nietion and was taking advantage of the fact that Nietion hadn't fully recovered to force him to step forward. Nietion had originally wanted to rest and recover, but now it seemed that wasn't going to happen. The green-robed old man was a late paramount god, which meant that he had a very high status. Therefore, it would be very easy for him to harm Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan. This green-robed old man definitely had a very high position in the Black Lotus. He was the 7th of the 12 Lotus Lords. "Fine, as you wish," Nietion said with a faint smile. Then he blurred into motion, stepping onto one of the stone pillars in the slaughtering arena. What's that guy doing here?" When everyone saw Nietion step onto the slaughtering arena, they couldn't help but look at him with strange expressions. None of them could have imagined that Nietion, who had just been through a bitter battle, would step onto the stage. Little did they know that Nietion had been forced to step onto the stage by the 7 lords. You've just been through a huge battle, and you're already injured, but you still dare to step onto the stage? Do you really think the people down there are all trash? The 7 lords leaped up into the air and looked around at the crowd. Which one of you dares to step onto the stage and fight him? Nietion couldn't help but frown at the words of the 7 lords. The 7 lords were truly sinister. First, they forced Nietion to step onto the slaughtering arena, and then they taunted the people down there to provoke them. "Allow me." As soon as the words of the 7 Lotus Lords faded, a violent voice rang out as a silhouette flew out, landing on another stone pillar. Just now, when Nietion's group fought against Nangong Ju, everyone had witnessed his strength. However, everyone felt that the current Nietion was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If they were to fight him now, their chances of winning would be very high. Nietion looked at the martial artist in front of him with a faint smile. His opponent was a middle-aged cultivator. He was burly, but he was not very strong. He was only a late overgod. In front of Nietion, this kind of strength was utterly worthless. Nietion sensed that there was a killing formation in the surrounding space, and it was set up in a special way. It was circular, like a huge circular wall that surrounded the slaughtering arena. There was a gap of several dozen meters in the killing formation. It was the entrance for cultivators to enter the slaughtering arena. The top of the killing formation was also open, allowing cultivators to move around freely. The killing formation in the space was very powerful. Many cultivators had been killed by their opponents after being struck by the killing formation. "Kid, you're very strong, but you're too arrogant. You still dare to step onto the stage when you're injured. You're looking to die." The cultivator stared at Nietion with a dark gaze as killing intent flowed from his eyes. "Make your move." The corner of Nietion's lips twitched. His face was cold, and he did not even look at his opponent. How arrogant! The cultivator immediately roared angrily when he felt Nietion's disdain. Then he moved and slapped out violently. Nietion didn't even spare a glance. Black runes surged out his body as he stabbed out with his sword. Sword shadows whistled through the air, directly shattering the palm shadows in the air. Then, Nietian charged madly towards the martial artist. Bang! In the next moment, there was a muffled sound, and the cultivator was sent flying. He collided with the killing formation, and the power of the formation was released, tearing him to pieces. The air was covered in blood. Hiss! Everyone gasped in unison when they saw this scene, and their eyes trembled without end. Who would have thought that Nietian could still explode with such terrifying power when he was injured? When the 7 Lotus Masters saw this scene from high up in the sky, they could not help but frown. Their faces were ashen and extremely ugly. Next, the corner of Nietian's lips twitched as he smiled coldly. He looked at everyone below the stage with a disdainful gaze. Everyone trembled. Their faces were filled with shock. After a long time, there was no movement from below the stage. For a moment, no one dared to step onto the stage. Nietian stood on top of the stone pillar. The demonic chi in his body revolved unceasingly. His strength was rapidly recovering. The origin of the earth was too terrifying. It allowed Nietian to have a monstrous recovery ability. Just now, he had burned a large amount of his blood chi and was indeed in a weak state. But now he had recovered by more than half. Let me. At this moment, another voice rang out. Then, a silhouette landed on top of the stone pillar. Chapter 1829. On the killing field, Nietian stared at the gray-robed martial artist in front of him. He had not expected that his second opponent would be an early-stage paramount god. This martial artist was not old. He was about 50 to 60,000 years old. To be able to reach the level of a paramount god at such a young age, his martial arts talent was not bad. However, compared to Nangongju, he was still lacking. A paramount god martial artist. When the crowd saw the gray-robed martial artist's strength, their eyes darkened and their expressions changed. They began to discuss among themselves. The silver-haired martial artist's strength is very strange. However, he was injured quite badly. If he fights a paramount god martial artist now, he'll be in danger. This silver-haired martial artist is very young and talented. It would be a pity for him to die like this. Yeah, this silver-haired kid's strength is not high, but his battle prowess is already so terrifying. I wonder how terrifying he will be when he grows up. It's a pity that his opponent is too strong. He'll die without a doubt. Everyone was convinced that Nietian was doomed, and that he would die beyond a shadow of a doubt. Stinking brat, I want to see how you're going to fight an early-stage paramount god martial artist with your injured body. The 7 Lotus Lords watched from above with a sinister glint in their eyes. They were incomparably venomous. He felt that if Nietian was at his peak, he might stand a chance against an early-stage paramount god martial artist. However, the latter was heavily injured, so he had no chance at all. When Nietian fought Nangongju just now, he had the help of Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukong. Of course, it was not comparable to the current situation. Your strength is not bad. It's a pity that your opponent is me. The gray-robed martial artist smiled coldly. His eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. He and Nietian did not know each other. However, since the two of them were standing on the killing field at the same time, it was destined that only one of them would survive. Make your move. Nietian took a deep breath and smiled. His expression became calm again. There was no fear in his eyes, only an intense desire to fight. All right. The gray-robed cultivator laughed coldly once more, following which his aura surged and a terrifying strength filled the air. In the next instant, he sent out a palm strike. Instantly, a surging wave of palm energy spread out and a vast palm image pressed down on Nietian. Nietian sensed the might of his opponent's attack. Sword intent gushed forth from his entire body as the runes of his 3 forbidden arts turned berserk, after which he blasted out with his sword as a terrifying sword shadow whizzed out, directly clashing with the palm in the air. Because there was a killing array around the killing field, when martial artists fought, they could only clash head-on and could not avoid it. Boom! In midair, the shadow of the palm and the shadow of the sword collided with each other. There was a loud bang, and a terrible blast spread out. Tian and the gray-clothed martial artist retreated at the same time, then stabilized themselves at the same time. The gray-clothed cultivator exclaimed in surprise. He did not expect that Tian would still be able to withstand his palm strike under such circumstances. Tian steadied himself, but his face was a little pale. His current state was still too weak. Activating the 3 forbidden arts was a huge burden on him. "Little brat, you have surprised me, but that's all there is to it." The gray-clothed cultivator laughed coldly as his gaze turned cold, following which his silhouette flickered and he once again sent out a palm strike towards Tian. This palm strike was even more terrifying than the previous one. The palm energy was earth-shattering, engulfing everything in its path. Tian, Jian Jingyun and Gue Wukan exclaimed in shock when they saw this scene. The crowd trembled, as if they could already see the scene of Tian being killed by a single palm strike. Tian stood in midair, his eyes were gloomy, but what he revealed wasn't fear, but killing intent. The sword intent in his body was condensing, and the sword intent around him was getting stronger and stronger. Forbidden astral space, activate. In the next moment, Tian bellowed. Boundless starlight surged out from his body, and the forbidden astral space boundary was activated. In the blink of an eye, the gray-clothed cultivator felt a mysterious force appearing in the air, and it actually suppressed his true meridians and godhead. He frowned slightly, but since he had already sent out a palm strike, it was too late for him to retract it. "Smelly brat, you're already an arrow at the end of its flight. What tricks can you play?" The gray-clothed cultivator roared in anger, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He didn't believe that Tian would have a chance to counterattack in this situation. Heaven and earth duo kill. Tian ignored the gray-clothed cultivator. The corner of his mouth twitched as he roared. His sword slashed out, and the sword intent on the tip of his sword condensed into a giant serpent. The giant serpent's body was 5,000 to 6,000 meters long, resembling a giant dragon. Feeling the giant serpent's momentum, the gray-clothed cultivator's eyes narrowed, and he screamed in fear. He never imagined that Tian, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight, would still be able to erupt with such terrifying power. The crowd's eyes widened in shock, and their expressions stiffened. No! Right at this time, a figure leaped out from the crowd, roaring as he dashed towards the killing arena. However, it was already too late. Boom! Crack! In the air above the killing arena, a palm shadow and the giant serpent collided. A thunderous boom resounded as the giant palm shadow shattered, and the giant serpent's body rolled on the ground, rushing towards the gray-clothed cultivator. The gray-clothed cultivator felt that something was amiss. He wanted to attack again, but it was already too late. Boom! The giant serpent's body swooped down, releasing a violent force. The gray-clothed cultivator's body was sent flying, crashing heavily into the killing array. His body was torn to shreds, and blood splattered everywhere. Tian had killed the gray-clothed cultivator with a single slash of his sword. In an instant, everyone's eyes widened, and they looked at Tian in fear, as if they were looking at a monster. Tian was too terrifying. Under such circumstances, he could actually turn defeat into victory, and in such a straightforward manner. The scene was dead silent. Tian's figure stood in the air, but blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth, and his face was as pale as a sheet. In that slash, he had used up a large amount of star energy, and on top of that, he had used up a lot of his blood chi. His current condition was almost at the limits of his martial physique. How is this possible? After a long time, the 7 Lotus Masters' lifeless faces finally showed some reaction, and they exclaimed in astonishment. How could they have imagined that Tian could still erupt with such terrifying power when he was seriously injured? Looking at Tian, the 7 Lotus Masters felt a chill in their hearts. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan slowly reacted, and the stiff expression on their faces turned into one of surprise. They had once again witnessed how terrifying Tian was. He was so monstrous that it made people's hair stand on end. Song Lin. At this moment, a wail suddenly rang out. A black-clothed figure stood in midair, and a pair of blood-red eyes stared at Nye Tian, filled with killing intent. Nye Tian looked at the black-clothed figure, and he could not help but narrow his eyes. Just now, the black-clothed cultivator had wanted to save the gray-clothed cultivator, but he was too late, and the gray-clothed cultivator had been killed by Nye Tian. Nye Tian realized that the black-clothed cultivator's appearance was somewhat similar to the gray-clothed cultivator's. It seemed that the two of them were related. What is this person trying to do? The crowd's attention was attracted by the black-clothed cultivator, and they all looked over as they exclaimed. Chapter 1830. Nye Tian couldn't help but frown as he looked at the man in black. So this man was the brother of the man he had killed. The man Nye Tian had killed was called Song Lin, and the man in black was Song Lin's older brother, Song Sun. Song Sin's eyes were brimming with killing intent, but he didn't make a move. He had already been to the slaughterhouse once, and if he entered again, he would be breaking the rules. With Nangong Ju as an example, Song Sun didn't dare to make a move. Nye Tian could sense that Song Sun was also an early paramount god, and his aura was even stronger than Song Lin's. Given Nye Tian's current state, it would be a stretch for him to fight Song's senator. Countless gazes were fixed on Song Sun, their eyes shining brightly, as if they were all waiting for him to make a move. Song Sin's eyes were filled with venom as he looked up at the 7 Lotus Lords. Since you want to avenge your brother, what are you waiting for? The 7 Lotus Lords said coldly with a sinister smile. The 7 Lotus Lords were clearly instigating Song Sun to kill Nye Tian. Many thanks, Your Excellency. Song Sin's eyes flickered as he expressed his gratitude. Then he spun around to look at Nye Tian, his fierce killing intent spreading out and filling the air. Despicable! Nye Tian cursed angrily as he shot a glance at the 7 Lotus Masters. He had never imagined that the 7 Lotus Lords would be this shameless. Since he couldn't make a move himself, they were instigating Song Sun to make a move. Song Sin's eyes flashed, and he moved to enter the slaughterhouse. However, at that moment, a terrifying force descended from the sky, forcing Song Sun to retreat. Get back! In the next moment, a deep voice was heard as a ghostly figure appeared in the sky. Who are you? Song Sun was taken aback. He looked at the ghostly figure in the sky and let out a low roar. He was obviously very angry. Nye Tian was also taken aback. He looked up at the newcomer, and his eyes narrowed. It's this guy. The person who had suddenly appeared was none other than the head of the 12 Lotus Lords, the one who had been angered by Nye Tian to the point of vomiting blood. When the 7 Lotus heads saw the arrival of the head of the Lotus, their old faces stiffened and they looked extremely embarrassed. He did not expect that the Lotus head would suddenly appear. The Lotus head looked at Song Sun with a venomous and cold gaze and said, If you want to kill him, then wait until you enter the path of slaughter. This is a slaughterhouse, not a place for you to take revenge. His deep voice resounded through the void, carrying with it an undefiable tyranny. Song Sun felt a powerful aura pressing down on him. He took a few steps back and did not dare to take another step forward. After the Lotus head finished speaking, it no longer looked at Song Sun. Instead, it locked its gaze onto the 7 Lotus Masters and said in a deep voice, Old 7, the rules of the slaughterhouse cannot be abolished. Yes. The 7 Lotus Lords were drenched in cold sweat as they bowed and replied. He was very curious as to why the Lotus head would suddenly appear here. Furthermore, the Lotus head's current actions were clearly to protect Nye Tian. This made him very puzzled. Although they had doubts in their hearts, the 7 Lotus Masters did not dare to voice them. Nye Tian looked at the head of the Lotus and frowned slightly. He also felt that it was strange. The Lotus head had not killed him before, yet it was standing out to protect him now. This was just too strange. Nye Tian could not understand the reason behind this. It seemed like Black Lotus was extremely happy to see him participate in the path of slaughter. Continue. The Lotus head nodded heavily, indicating that the battle could continue. Nye Tian had defeated 2 cultivators consecutively. He only needed to defeat one more person to gain the right to enter the path of slaughter. I'll fight you. At this moment, an arrogant voice rang out. Afterwards, a figure landed in the slaughterhouse and stared at Nietian with a deep gaze. Oomph. Nietian looked at his opponent and sneered. This person was only a late overgod. Clearly, he wanted to take advantage of Nietian's heavy injuries. Unfortunately, he had no idea what Nietian's limits were. Since you're looking to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Niet Tianling sneered. Afterwards, he moved, and sword intense surged from all of his body. He directly stabbed out, and a terrifying blur shot out towards the cultivator. The blur was like a bolt of lightning. It was extremely fast, sharp, and murderous. As expected, the cultivator did not even have the time to cry out. He was directly slain by the blur. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and their faces were filled with horror. Nietian was just too terrifying. Even when he was heavily injured, he could still kill late overgods with ease. The Lotus Head and the 7 Lotus Masters could not help but frown when they saw this. They were surprised. Boss, just who is this kid? In the end, the 7 Lotus Masters could not hold back their curiosity. They asked the Lotus Head secretly, "Why do you want to save him?" "He's someone the Black Lotus King wants," the Lotus Head replied. The light in her eyes flickered, but she did not continue. The faces of the 7 Lotus Masters stiffened as sweat appeared on their foreheads. No wonder the Lotus Head wanted to save Nietian. As it turned out, it was the Black Lotus King's orders. As a result, it became even stranger. Why did the Black Lotus King want to protect Nietian? The Lotus Head became even more confused. The Black Lotus King wanted to kill Nietian first, and then he wanted to protect Nietian. It was just too strange. After killing his opponent, Nietian emerged from the battlefield of slaughter with a flash. He had won 3 battles in a row, so he had gained the right to enter the path of slaughter. "Nietian, are you all right?" Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan arrived beside Nietian. They asked nervously when they saw his pale face. "I'm fine." Nietian smiled faintly. He was not heavily injured. He had only used up a lot of energy and vitality. He would be fine after some rest. Nietian possessed the vein of the earth, so his recovery rate was shocking. He only needed half a day to make a full recovery. At this time, Nietian suddenly felt a killing intent. He turned around and saw Song San walking over. Nietian had already gained the right to enter the path of slaughter. Song San didn't dare to make a move against him. "Stinking brat, I'll be waiting for you in the path of slaughter. Your life is mine." Song San looked at Nietian with a gloomy face and said in a cold voice, "With just you?" Niet Tianling smiled with disdain. It was extremely provocative. Song San wanted to take revenge for his brother. This wasn't wrong. However, Nietian killing Song Lin wasn't wrong either. The battlefield of slaughter was a place where life and death were decided. After entering the battlefield of slaughter, it was either you die or I die. This martial world was just so bloody and cruel. Song San's eyes trembled. The muscles on his face twitched. He didn't speak anymore and turned around to leave. "Nietian, we haven't even entered the path of slaughter, and we've already offended 2 powerful opponents." Gue Wuchan looked at Song San's back and couldn't help smiling bitterly. "I'm going to be the king of slaughter. No one can stop me." The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. He smiled deeply. His gaze became incomparably firm. He said in his heart, "Those who block me die." Yi Qinghai told him that he must become the king of slaughter. Although Nietian didn't know what it meant, he would definitely achieve it. Chapter 1831. Nietian defeated 3 people and obtained the qualifications to enter the path of massacre. He did not leave immediately, but waited for Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan. Nietian did not know what the path of massacre was like, so he had to enter with Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan. The Lotus Head glanced at Nietian, then left. Everything went smoothly after that. Jian Jingyun and Gue Wuchan rested for 2 days, recovering their strength to their peak. Then, they entered the slaughtering field and successfully won 3 matches in a row, obtaining the qualifications to enter the path of massacre. Nietion and the other two walked out of the slaughtering field with relaxed expressions. Nietion, are we going to the path of massacre now? Goe Wuxian looked at Nietion and asked excitedly. Nietion thought for a moment, then nodded slightly and said, previously, that person from Black Lotus said that the earlier one enters the path of massacre, the more advantageous it is. Since we have already obtained the qualifications to enter the path of massacre, let's not waste any more time. At this time, Nietion's injuries had already recovered, so he could enter the path of massacre at any time. The three of them waited in place. After a moment, two black-clothed martial artists appeared. One of them said in a cold voice, "Follow us." Nietion and the other two looked at each other and followed behind the two black-clothed martial artists. Under the guidance of the black-clothed martial artist, Nietion and the others passed through the slaughtering field and entered a remote area. Afterwards, a dark and dense forest appeared before them. Is the path of massacre in this forest? Nietion looked at the forest in front of him and muttered to himself. After a moment, Nietion and the others entered the forest and walked on a large road. Nietion used his divine sense to sense and discovered that many experts were hiding on both sides of the road. Along the way, Nietion and the others also met other martial artists. All of them were very excited, looking forward to the path of massacre. Continuing forward, Nietion and the others entered a deep canyon and quickly arrived at the end of the canyon. Nietion saw that the martial artists participating in the path of massacre were entering the canyon one by one. "Kid, you're finally here." Before entering the canyon, Nietion heard a low voice, after which a silhouette descended from the sky. It was none other than the head of the lotus. When the lotus head arrived, the two black-clothed martial artists immediately left. "Are you worried that I won't come?" Nietion looked at the head of the lotus and smiled playfully. The lotus head also laughed and said, "I know you are back, but I am more concerned about how long you can live after entering the path of massacre. This is my own business. There is no need for you to concern yourself with it." Tianling replied coldly, "If there's nothing else, then please step aside. I still need to enter the path of massacre as soon as possible." "Don't worry." The lotus head smiled again and said, "Don't you want to know what the path of massacre is?" Nietion glanced at the lotus head and said coldly, "I will figure out what the path of slaughter is. There is no need for you to deliberately mystify it in front of me. If you don't want to vomit blood again, then please step aside." "You." The lotus head looked at Nietion and felt a tightness in its chest. For a moment, it couldn't speak. "Step aside." Nietion roared in a low voice and looked at the lotus head with a gloomy expression. The lotus head's eyes were burning with anger, but it didn't dare to move. In the end, it could only step aside. Nietion didn't look at the lotus head again and directly walked forward. The lotus head looked at Nietion's back and said gloomily in its heart, "Stinking brat, I will let you be arrogant for now. When you enter the path of massacre, you will cry." Nietion had repeatedly provoked the lotus head. If it wasn't for the Black Lotus King's order, the latter would have already killed him. Nietion walked towards the canyon, but the person in front of him was walking very slowly. Nietion wasn't in a hurry and waited patiently. Nietion. Right at this time, the fat cat's voice suddenly sounded. It sounded a little strange. "Fat, what's wrong?" Nietion couldn't help but frown and ask, "What's wrong, Fat?" "Nietion, I know what the path of massacre is," the fat cat said in a deep voice with a hesitant expression. "You know." Nietion was stunned for a moment, and his expression changed. He suddenly remembered that ever since they entered the dark mountain range, the fat cat had been very quiet, which was very different from his personality in the past. Moreover, when the fat cat saw the pattern on the medallion of massacre, it obviously discovered something, but it didn't say anything. Nietion was very curious about what the fat cat discovered. The fat cat hesitated for a long time, and finally nodded and said, "The path of massacre is the same as the glazed demon pagoda. It is a sacred tool." "Sacred tool?" Nietion was stunned, and his expression instantly froze. He originally thought that the path of massacre was a forbidden area. He never thought that the path of massacre was a sacred tool. Nietion had seen the glazed demon pagoda before, and he had personally entered it. He was the one who brought the fat cat out from the glazed demon pagoda. Nietion was very clear about the terror of a sacred tool. Back then, the glazed demon pagoda spirit, the nine-tailed chinchilla, almost killed Nietion. How could Nietion ever think that the so-called Path of Massacre was actually a sacred tool? Fat, do you understand the Path of Massacre? After a moment, Nietion finally calmed down and asked in a deep voice, I don't understand. The fat cat shook its head slightly and said, I only have 5 tails now, and the chinchilla's inherited memories in my body have not been fully awakened, so I can't remember many things. What do you mean? Nietion was stunned. He didn't know what the fat cat was talking about. The fat cat sighed and then asked, Nietion, do you know why I know so many things? Huh? Nietion was stunned again, and then subconsciously said, because you have lived for a long time. The fat cat indeed knew a lot of things. Alchemy, refining tools, arrays, seals, and all kinds of things. There was almost nothing the fat cat didn't know. Nietion was often surprised how the fat cat knew so many things. He thought that the fat cat might have lived for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years, so it wasn't strange that it knew a lot of things. At this time, the fat cat suddenly mentioned the chinchilla's inherited memories, which made Nietion completely confused. The fat cat shook its head and said, I have indeed lived for a long time, but I've always lived in the glazed demon pagoda, until you appeared, and I walked out of the glazed demon pagoda. This, Nietion was stunned and said, then how do you know so many things? Nietion thought that the fat cat didn't live in the glazed demon pagoda in the past, but was later captured into the demon pagoda to become a tool spirit. He didn't expect that the fat cat had been living in the glazed demon pagoda. This was very strange. How did the fat cat, who had never left the glazed demon pagoda, know so many things? The fat cat's expression became much more serious and said, regarding the chinchilla's inherited memories, I shouldn't tell you, because this is the nine-tailed chinchilla family secret. But since I am connected with you, there is no harm in telling you some things.